Chapter 1829. In order to prevent Hong Xiu from obtaining the strength of living beings, Mu Fan could be said to have given up everything. He didn't even care about Ma Tang's feelings and gave up the strength of living beings. As long as Hong Xiu obtained it, Mu Fan could accept anyone else. After hearing Mu Fan's shout, Chiu Ru, who had been indifferent, finally made her move. She moved her feet and flew towards Hong Xiu. Seeing that Chiu Ru finally made her move, Mu Fan sneered. "Shao Qin, I will never let you have your way." As long as he could stop Hong Xiu from obtaining the strength of living beings, Mu Fan could accept it. Upon hearing this, Shao Qin frowned slightly. Chiu Ru's attack had indeed left Shao Qin with no other choice, because there was no one on his side who could stop Chiu Ru. Even Long Qing and Xian Yuanling had made their move. Shao Qin indeed had no one to rely on, and he couldn't free himself. Who would have thought that in order to prevent Hong Xiu from obtaining the strength of living beings, Mu Fan would be willing to give it up? This was indeed a desperate gamble. For example, although Guan Hong and Quan Fong had made their moves, they could only stop Hong Xiu from obtaining the strength of living beings. If there was really no other way, they could only watch helplessly as Hong Xiu obtained the strength of living beings. They definitely wouldn't be like Mu Fan, who would rather give up than let Hong Xiu have her way. Mu Fan's decision was obviously inseparable from his hatred for Shao Qin. Ignoring Mu Fan's words, Shao Qin didn't stop attacking. However, it was certain that he wouldn't be able to deal with Mu Fan in a short period of time. In the blink of an eye, when Hong Xiu was less than 10 meters away from the strength of living beings, she was stopped by Chiu Ru. With less than 10 meters, Hong Xiu could successfully enter the strength of living beings and no one would be able to stop her. However, it was this distance of less than 10 meters that was completely cut off with Chiu Ru's appearance. The slightest difference could lead to a great loss. Looking at Chiu Ru, Hong Xiu's eyes flashed with a strange glint, and she said with a complicated expression, "Sister Chiu Ru." Hong Xiu and Chiu Ru were on good terms, so Hong Xiu had mixed feelings when Chiu Ru tried to stop her. Upon hearing Hong Xiu's words, Chiu Ru's expression changed slightly, and she let out a helpless sigh. Chiu Ru attached great importance to the power of all beings. After all, the fifth realm needed the power of all beings very much. However, Chiu Ru knew that the power of all beings was extremely important to Hong Xiu. Ever since she was young, Mu Fan had always targeted Hong Xiu. As a result, other than Yi Xiao, Hong Xiu did not have any good friends. It wasn't that there was a problem with Hong Xiu herself. It was just that Hong Xiu didn't dare to make friends with others. Once someone got close to Hong Xiu, Mu Fan would make a move. Chiu Ru had always been disgusted with Mu Fan's way of doing things. In Chiu Ru's eyes, Mu Fan was a little abnormal. Hong Xiu was like a plaything in Mu Fan's eyes, and she could only be Mu Fan's plaything. It wasn't easy for Hong Xiu to meet Shao Qin. Shao Qin treated Hong Xiu well, and wasn't afraid of Mu Fan at all. Due to Shao Qin's presence, Hong Xiu gradually got rid of her fear of Mu Fan. Looking at Hong Xiu, Chiu Ru pondered for a few moments and said indifferently, "Go ahead." Chiu Ru stepped aside and made way for Hong Xiu. It was apparent that she had given up the power of all beings to Hong Xiu. Yi Xiao, who was secretly delighted, inadvertently saw that Chiu Ru had made way for Hong Xiu. Upon seeing this, Mu Fan flew into a rage. "Chiu Ru, what are you doing?" Originally, Mu Fan wanted Chiu Ru to stop Hong Xiu. But now, even though they had caught up, Chiu Ru took the initiative to make way for Hong Xiu. This made Mu Fan's anger soar to the sky. Upon hearing Mu Fan's angry roar, Chiu Ru coldly glanced at him and said, "Do I need to report to you what I do?" Chiu Ru didn't like Mu Fan at all. At this moment, because of his anger, Mu Fan actually used a commanding tone to speak to her. It made Chiu Ru feel like she was his subordinate. As a result, Chiu Ru, who had a cold personality, naturally wouldn't be nice to Mu Fan. Upon hearing Chiu Ru's words, Mu Fan was furious. At the same time, Hong Xiu looked at Qiu Ru's actions and was slightly stunned. Sister Qiu Ru, Hong Xiu didn't expect Qiu Ru to make way for Hong Xiu. Her eyes revealed a touch of emotion. Upon hearing Hong Xiu's words, a rare gentle smile appeared on Qiu Ru's face. She gently stroked Hong Xiu's hair and said, "Silly girl, hurry up and go. This is a rare opportunity. If you miss it, perhaps you won't encounter such an opportunity again in your life." Qiu Ru's words weren't false. The strength of living beings was something that could only be encountered and not sought. If Hong Xiu missed this opportunity, perhaps she wouldn't have such an opportunity again in her life. When that time came, Hong Xiu would probably have to settle for the second best and condense the Earth Immortal's abode. Upon hearing Qiu Ru's words, Hong Xiu's eyes reddened. She didn't know what to say, but she immediately threw herself into Qiu Ru's arms and said in a choked voice, "Sister Qiu Ru." Qiu Ru had always been good to Hong Xiu. In the past, other than Yi Xiao, Qiu Ru was the only one who would stand up for Hong Xiu. However, Qiu Ru wasn't always by Hong Xiu's side, so she couldn't help Hong Xiu much. Looking at Hong Xiu's tear-stained face, Qiu Ru smiled helplessly and said, all right, silly girl. Now isn't the time to cry. Hurry up and go." Upon seeing Qiu Ru and Hong Xiu acting so intimately, Mu Fan, who was not far away, almost vomited blood. He gritted his teeth and shouted coldly, "What an idiot!" In Mu Fan's opinion, Qiu Ru was indeed an idiot. How could she give up a treasure like the strength of living beings so easily? However, even though Mu Fan was angry, he had no other choice. If Qiu Ru didn't intervene, no one else would stop Hong Xiu. On the other hand, Shao Chen heaved a sigh of relief. Judging from the current situation, it was almost certain that Hong Xiu would win the force of living beings. Shao Chen felt that Qiu Ru's choice was reasonable. After all, when the war in the Second Wilderness had just ended and everyone was preparing to return to the First Wilderness, Qiu Ru had already shown her concern for Hong Xiu. Moreover, Hong Xiu was the one who told him about Mu Fan. When he showed indifference, Qiu Ru was even dissatisfied with it. It could be seen that Qiu Ru's concern for Hong Xiu came from the bottom of her heart and wasn't fake. Therefore, Qiu Ru's choice at this time wasn't strange. Please add it to your collection. Monthly vote recommend it. Chapter 1830. Qiu Ru's concern for Hong Xiu was genuine. She gently stroked Hong Xiu's hair and said softly, "All right, silly girl, quickly go in." Hearing Qiu Ru's words, Hong Xiu lifted her head and looked at Qiu Ru with red eyes. Then, she smiled and said, "Sister Qiu Ru, thank you." After saying that, Hong Xiu ran into the door without any obstruction. Following her entry, the door slowly closed. Hong Xiu successfully entered the door. As a result, no one could open the force of living things. They could only wait for Hong Xiu to refine the power within before the force of living things finally dissipated. Everything had been settled. At the same time, Guan Hong, Quan Feng, Fu Rui, Lu Xiao, Xianyuan Ling, and Long Qing all stopped fighting. Since the force of living things had been obtained by Hong Xiu, there was naturally no reason for them to continue fighting. Only Shao Chen and Mu Fan were still fighting fiercely at this time. Mu Fan did not stop completely because of the anger in his heart. He had voluntarily given up the strength of living things, but in the end, he still let Hong Xiu have her way. How could Mu Fan accept that? He attacked with hatred. However, Shao Chen was not afraid at all. Mu Fan's bloodline of the three clans was fully unleashed, and Shao Chen's sword body was also displayed without any reservation. The two of them were locked in a fierce battle. As for Guan Hong and the others, they had no intention of joining in. They were very clear about the hatred between Shao Chen and Mu Fan. However, no one wanted to interfere. After all, there was no benefit to it. However, there was one exception, and that was Yi Xiao. Originally, Long Qing and Xianyuan Ling saw that Mu Fan was unwilling to give up and were ready to join in. However, Yi Xiao took the lead and joined in. Yi Xiao immediately joined the battle. He looked coldly at Mu Fan and shouted, "Mu Fan, I've been waiting for this opportunity for a long time." Yi Xiao did not have a good impression of Mu Fan. Furthermore, Xiao Chen was her good friend, so it was not strange for Yi Xiao to make a move. With the addition of Yi Xiao, Mu Fan quickly fell into a disadvantageous position while facing the attacks of two heirs at the same time. Seeing that Xiao Chen and Yi Xiao had no intention of stopping, in the end, Guan Hong, Quan Feng, and Lu Xiao had to step in together to stop the battle from continuing. The reason why Guan Hong and the other two had acted was simple. They did not want to see Xiao Chen and Yi Xiao kill Mu Fan. Although Mu Fan's personality was not likable, he was still the heir of Hachibara Senkai. Furthermore, if Xiao Chen and Yi Xiao wanted to kill Mu Fan, even the sector lords would not agree. After stopping the fierce battle between the three of them, Guan Hong, the good guy, came out to be the peacemaker again. That's it. We are all heirs of the 8-barren immortal world. Killing each other will only benefit others. Hearing Guan Hong's words, Mu Fan did not say anything. He just snorted coldly. Humph. Then, he turned and left. Now that the power of living things was useless, and he had suffered a loss at the hands of Xiao Chen and Yi Xiao, Mu Fan was not in the mood to stay. He quickly left with Ma Tang and the other 4 geniuses from the first realm. Like Mu Fan, Ma Tang's expression was very ugly. The power of living things had slipped away from her just like that. Ma Tang was definitely not in a good mood. Mu Fan left with his people. Xiao Chen and Yi Xiao did not stop him. In fact, the two of them knew that it would not be easy to kill Mu Fan. Now was not the time. Today, the two of them had joined forces to make Mu Fan suffer such a great loss. It was already a perfect result. After Mu Fan left, the atmosphere in the field eased up. Guan Hong looked at Xiao Chen and Yi Xiao. He wanted to say something, but in the end, he only sighed and did not say anything. Between you and Mu Fan, originally, he wanted to persuade Xiao Chen and Yi Xiao. They were all the heirs of Hachibara Senkai. It was fine if some grudges could be settled. Why did they have to kill each other like this? It should be known that no matter if something happened to Mu Fan, Xiao Chen, or Yi Xiao, it would be the Hachibara Senkai's strength that would be lost. This was something that no one wanted to see. Unfortunately, before he could say anything, Guan Hong had already dispelled this idea. This was because he knew that with the 3 of their personalities, they would definitely not let this matter rest. Needless to say, with Mu Fan's hatred for Xiao Chen and Yi Xiao, he would not let this matter rest unless the sun rose from the west. As for Xiao Chen and Yi Xiao, they were not good people either. Once they had the chance, they would definitely kill Mu Fan without hesitation. This matter was indeed not something that could be resolved with a few words of persuasion. Therefore, Guan Hong did not say anything in the end because it would be useless. Without Mu Fan, the group naturally gathered together. As they still had to wait for Hong Xiu to refine the power of living things, they obviously could not leave Hong Xiu here alone. Therefore, the group stayed here and wanted to wait for Hong Xiu to finish refining the power of living things before returning to the first wilderness together. They gathered together, drank, and chatted. According to past practice, it would take at least a few months to refine the power of living things, so they could not leave for the time being. At the same time that the power of living things was coming to an end in the second wilderness, in the first wilderness, where the Hachibara Senkai was located, due to the departure of the heirs of heirs, the various realms were much more peaceful. This was especially so for the 7th realm and the 1st realm. Because Xiao Chen and Mu Fan had both gone to the second wilderness, although the people from the 2 realms still did not see eye to eye with each other, there were no more conflicts between them. The Hachibara Senkai was unusually peaceful, but the first wilderness was different. Since half a month ago, there had been a lot of news that someone from the 8 wastelands had infiltrated the first wilderness. Now there had been some unrest in the first wilderness. Someone from the 8 wastelands had secretly infiltrated the first wilderness. This was, of course, an order from the will of the heavenly way. Their purpose was very simple, which was to create some trouble for the Hachibara Senkai. Now that both sides had chosen to temporarily stop fighting, the will of the heavenly way obviously did not want the Hachibara Senkai to live so comfortably, so they created some trouble for the Hachibara Senkai. Although this would not hurt the foundation of the Hachibara Senkai, the Hachibara Senkai would definitely not ignore it. The will of the heavenly way was happy to see the Hachibara Senkai unhappy. In half a month, the unrest in the first wilderness had become more and more serious, and the Hachibara Senkai could no longer ignore it. At this time, hundreds of immortal Emperor Realm elders of the Hachibara Senkai had gathered together to discuss how to deal with the unrest in the first wilderness. There had been news that confirmed that the unrest this time was related to the 8 wastelands, but they still could not find the experts from the 8 wastelands who had infiltrated the first wilderness. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 1831. The turmoil in the first wilderness was not a big deal to the Hachibara Senkai. At the very least, it was not enough to shake the foundation of the Hachibara Senkai. Hence, the Realm Lords had no intention of paying any attention to this matter. Instead, they handed it over to the elders to handle. After all, there would not be many people from the 8 desolates who had infiltrated the first wilderness this time. Furthermore, they would not be too strong. Hence, the elders were more than enough to handle this matter. The most important issue now was how to find the experts from the 8 desolates who had infiltrated the first wilderness. As long as they could find them, things would be much easier. The elders from the various realms gathered together. There were nearly 100 of them, including the wine Taoist. Everyone, the people from the 8 desolates have infiltrated the first wilderness. Let's talk about what we should do. An elder from the first realm who had gathered said. Hearing this, another elder said plainly, "They're just a bunch of weaklings. Just find them and kill them." The elders present scoffed at the 8 desolation immortal world's little trick. After all, with the strength of the 8 desolation immortal world, if these little tricks were effective, the two sides wouldn't have been in a stalemate for so long. To put it bluntly, the 8 desolates' actions this time were to annoy the Hachibara Senkai. There was no other reason for this. Hearing this elder's words, the rest of the elders nodded in agreement. They were indeed a bunch of weaklings. As long as they could find them, it would be easy to kill them. However, the problem now was how to find the experts from the 8 desolates who had infiltrated the first wilderness. For the past half a month, the Hachibara Senkai had been searching for the whereabouts of these people. However, they had not found anything so far. It seemed that these people knew about the power of the Hachibara Senkai in the first wilderness and were very good at hiding. Since they could not find the whereabouts of these people, they naturally could not take action. After some discussion, some people guessed that some forces in the first wilderness had secretly sided with the 8 desolate. Otherwise, without the help of the local forces of the first wilderness, these people would not have been able to escape the Hachibara Senkai's search. There might be a spy in the first wilderness. This was the only explanation that could explain why the Hachibara Senkai had not found anything despite their extensive search. With such a guess, it was not an easy task to find the traitor. One should know that in the first wilderness, there were at least tens of thousands of forces, big and small. It was impossible to eliminate all these forces. Since they couldn't find any suspicious targets for now, the elders could only continue their search step by step. They continued to increase the intensity of their search while secretly investigating the various organizations in the first wilderness. That was the only way. At least for now, there was no better way. After a simple discussion, the elders dispersed one after another. Li Qiu and the wine Taoist left the hall and returned to the first world together. Along the way, Li Qiu said to the wine Taoist, "This time, I want you to be in charge of the search in the 7th world. Every world had to have an elder in charge of this search. This was the unanimous decision of the elders. Li Qiu intended to let the wine Taoist be in charge of the seventh world. This was definitely an opportunity to perform meritorious deeds, but after hearing Li Qiu's words, the wine Taoist shook his head and refused without hesitation. "Spare me, I don't want it." Being in charge of this search was definitely a tiring task. The wine Taoist was unwilling to do it. The wine Taoist was lazy by nature and lived a life of drunken stupor. Now that the wine Taoist was asked to handle this matter, he was naturally unwilling. Unfortunately, in the face of the wine Taoist's refusal, Li Qiu did not give him the slightest chance and directly handed the task to him. "Why must I be the one to do this?" Helpless, the wine Taoist asked reluctantly. Facing the wine Taoist's question, Li Qiu let out a hearty laugh. "Haha, it's because you're the most inexperienced. No one is willing to do this, so you're the only one left." There were a total of 9 elders in the seventh world. The wine Taoist was the most inexperienced, and this search for the powerhouses of the 8 barons was obviously a tough task that no one was willing to accept, including Li Qiu himself. Therefore, the wine Taoist had no choice but to hand the task over to him. Without waiting for the wine Taoist's response, Li Qiu floated away. Looking at Li Qiu's back, the wine Taoist was taken aback. Then, he snarled. "Li Qiu, screw you." Li Qiu didn't care if the wine Taoist agreed or not. Anyway, he had handed the task over to the wine Taoist. As for how the wine Taoist would handle it, it was up to him. With a furious roar, there was nothing the wine Taoist could do. He could only return to the first world and deal with the matter of the experts from the 8 Desolaces infiltrating the first wilderness. There was no need to worry too much about the first barons. After all, such a small matter wouldn't damage the foundation of the Hachibara Senkai. Just as the elders of the Hachibara Senkai began to deal with this matter, Mu Fan, who had suffered a huge loss in the second barons, had already left with his people. Along the way, Mu Fan's face was so gloomy that Ma Tang and the others didn't dare to approach him. Sitting alone in the starship, the murderous intent in Mu Fan's eyes didn't dissipate. On the contrary, it became even more intense. He was determined to kill Xiao Chen. After suffering losses in the hands of Xiao Chen, one could imagine how Mu Fan felt. Along the way, he thought about how to kill Xiao Chen. Just as the starship was about to activate the second barons, a glint flashed in Mu Fan's eyes. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly, revealing a cold smile. He suddenly had a thought. If he succeeded, there was a high chance that he could kill Xiao Chen. Of course, it wasn't just Xiao Chen. The other heirs of Kunlun's field would probably die as well. Mu Fan didn't have much enmity towards Guan Hong and the others. If he wanted to blame someone, he could only blame Xiao Chen. After making up his mind, Mu Fan's eyes flashed coldly as he thought coldly, "Xiao Chen, you asked for it." No one knew what kind of plan Mu Fan had in mind. After pondering for a while, Mu Fan called in Ma Tang and the other 4 geniuses of the first barons. They didn't know what orders Mu Fan had for them. The 5 of them came in front of Mu Fan and were about to bow to him. However, without warning, Mu Fangfang directly punched Ma Tang in the chest. Mu Fan was caught off guard and was punched in the chest. He immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. "Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 1832. Mu Fan had attacked without warning and killed Ma Tang with a single punch. As the number 2 figure among the younger generation in the first realm, Ma Tang's loyalty to Mu Fan was unquestionable. But now, he was killed by Mu Fan with a single punch. Spitting out a large mouthful of blood, Ma Tang looked at Mu Fan in disbelief. He had never thought that Mu Fan would suddenly make a move to kill him. Throughout the journey, Ma Tang had never done anything against Mu Fan. He didn't understand why Mu Fan wanted to kill him. His eyes were filled with doubt and sorrow as he stared at Mu Fan. He opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but in the end, he couldn't utter a single word and fell stiffly to the ground. Ma Tang couldn't believe that he had died in Ma Tang's hands. Moreover, Ma Tang didn't understand why Mu Fan wanted to kill him. Ma Tang died on the spot due to the lack of strength in his body. When the other four geniuses saw this scene, their expressions changed drastically. They looked at Mu Fan and said in horror, "Mas, senior brother, we." She stuttered. They didn't know what had happened that caused Mu Fan to suddenly kill them. But in the face of the threat of death, the four geniuses of the first realm were completely flustered. They stammered for a long time, but in the end, they couldn't even finish a complete sentence. Hearing their stammering, Mu Fan said with a cold expression, "I have a plan, but this plan needs to be kept a secret. No one can know about it. Mas, senior brother, we won't say anything. We will definitely keep it a secret." Hearing Mu Fan's words, the four geniuses of the first realm patted their chests and promised that they would never reveal this secret. However, just as the four of them finished speaking, Mu Fan had already attacked. With Mu Fan's strength, it wasn't difficult for him to kill the four geniuses of the first realm. So, soon, the four of them were killed by Mu Fan one by one, just like Ma Tang. After killing Ma Tang and the other four, Mu Fan said indifferently, "In my opinion, only the dead can keep a secret." Ma Tang had a plan in his mind. It was a plan that could kill Shao Chen, but he couldn't let anyone know about it. Therefore, Ma Tang and the others had to die. As for killing a loyal lackey like Ma Tang, it didn't affect Mu Fan at all. If he wanted a lackey, Mu Fan could find someone else. Ma Tang wasn't irreplaceable. In order to kill Shao Chen, Mu Fan did not hesitate to kill the 5 sky prides of the first realm who were following him. This guy was indeed a person who would stop at nothing. After killing Ma Tang and the other 4, Mu Fan did not show much emotion. He steered the starship and headed directly to the third wasteland, which was close to the second wasteland. The second desolation was next to the seventh and third desolation. Mu Fan didn't choose to go to the seventh desolation because the wills of the heavens were there. He was afraid that he would be in danger, so he went to the third desolation. As for why Mu Fan went to the third wilderness, think about it. If the strong people from the 8 wilderness knew that the force of all living things existed in the second wilderness, and that Shao Chun and the other heirs of the 8 wilderness were in the second wilderness, what would they do? There was no doubt that if the 8 wilderness knew about this, they would definitely send strong people to kill Shao Chun and the others. In the short term, Shao Chun and the others would definitely not leave the second wilderness because they had to wait for Hongxiu to finish refining the force of all living things before leaving. In this way, Mu Fan could successfully kill with a borrowed knife. Unfortunately, as Mu Fan said, if he wanted to carry out this plan, he had to keep it a secret. This was because if it was revealed that he was the one who had passed the information to the 8 wilderness, Mu Fan would probably die in the end. As the heir of the Hachibra Senkai, he had secretly colluded with the 8 wilderness and killed the other heirs of the 8 wilderness. This had definitely crossed the line of the realm lords. Therefore, even if Mu Fan was the heir of the 8 wilderness, the result wouldn't be good. It was because of this that Mu Fan didn't hesitate to kill Ma Tang and the others. In this way, no one would know that he was the one who had done all this. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Mu Fan also believed that the 8 wilderness would definitely be happy to kill Shao Chen and the other heirs of the 8 wilderness. This was because if they succeeded, it would definitely be a heavy blow to the Hachibra Senkai. At this time, there was no one around. If anyone knew that Mu Fan had come up with this plan, they would definitely call him crazy. As the heir of the Hachibra Senkai, Mu Fan naturally knew that the Hachibra Senkai and the 8 wilderness were like fire and water. From the beginning, the 2 sides were destined to never coexist. There was bound to be destruction. Only then could the 8 wilderness truly return to peace. However, Even if he knew that the Hachibra Senkai and the 8 Wilderness were like fire and water, Mu Fan still planned to use the 8 Wilderness to kill Shao Qin and the others. If this wasn't crazy, then what was? One had to know that in the Hachibra Senkai, colluding with the 8 Wilderness was definitely the most serious crime. No matter who it was, once discovered, they would definitely be killed. This was a minefield that should never be touched. However, now, in order to kill Shao Qin, Mu Fan had completely thrown all of this to the back of his mind. Mu Fan drove the starship alone and rushed towards the 3rd Wilderness. As the 3rd Wilderness was very close to the 2nd Wilderness, and Mu Fan did not stop at all along the way, he arrived outside the 3rd Wilderness in just a few days. The 3rd Wilderness was adjacent to the 2nd Wilderness, but at the same time it was also adjacent to the 1st Wilderness. Therefore, the entire 3rd Wilderness was in a state of isolation all year round. It was protected by an array, and anyone who wanted to enter or leave had to go through a strict inspection. As such, it was naturally impossible for Mu Fan to enter the 3rd Wilderness. However, Mu Fan did not need to enter the 3rd Wilderness. When he arrived at the entrance of the 3rd Wilderness, the top powers from the 8 Wilderness noticed Mu Fan from afar. Immediately, a Celestial Prime brought 2 Celestial Realm experts to the front of the starship that Mu Fan was in and blocked his way. Hachibara Senkai? Looking at the starship that Mu Fan was in, the Celestial Prime's face darkened, and he immediately prepared to attack. There was no need to hesitate when encountering people from the Hachibara Senkai. Before his voice died away, the Celestial Prime threw out a palm attack towards the starship that Mu Fan was in. Seeing this, Mu Fan did not panic. He also threw out a palm attack. At the same time, he said faintly, "Don't waste your energy. You are no match for me. Moreover, I have no other intention of coming here. I just have a piece of information that I believe you will be very interested in. Please add it to your collection, monthly vote recommend it." Chapter 1833. This Immortal Reverend was only at the beginning of the Immortal Reverend realm. He was responsible for guarding the entrance of the 3rd Wilderness. With his strength, he naturally wouldn't be able to hurt Mu Fan. Both of them struck out with their palms. Mu Fan easily blocked the Immortal Reverend's attack. Seeing this, the Immortal Reverend's face darkened. He couldn't help but feel nervous as he stared at Mu Fan, who was standing on the deck of the starship. Mu Fan had already put on a mask, so his face couldn't be seen clearly. Mu Fan wanted to use the 8 Desolates to kill Shao Qin and the others. Naturally, he couldn't expose his identity. Therefore, he carefully put on a mask. Unable to recognize Mu Fan's identity, the Immortal Reverend was secretly on guard. At the same time, Mu Fan said in a deep voice, "The power of living beings has been discovered in the 2nd Wilderness. Currently, all the heirs of the Hachibara Senkai are in the 2nd Wilderness, and they aren't protected by the experts of the Hachibara Senkai. This is your chance to make a contribution." Without wasting any time, Mu Fan told the Immortal Reverend the truth about the 2nd Wilderness. Upon hearing this, the Immortal Reverend was stunned. He didn't expect the power of living beings to appear in the 2nd Wilderness, and that all the heirs of the Hachibara Senkai were in the 2nd Wilderness. At the same time, they weren't protected by the experts of the older generation of the Hachibara Senkai. This was indeed a great opportunity to kill all the heirs of the Hachibara Senkai in one fell swoop. A strange light flashed in his eyes. Sensing the change in the Immortal Reverend's expression, Mu Fan's face, which was hidden under the mask, revealed a sinister smile. Now that the news had been relayed to the people of the 8 Desolates, it wasn't up to Mu Fan to decide what to do next. However, it was difficult to find out Mu Fan's plan. After learning about this, the 8 Desolates would definitely choose to take action. With a casual toss, a letter flew directly into the Immortal Reverend's hand. The content of the letter was none other than the location of Shao Qin and the others. Mu Fan had even told the 8 Desolates their exact location. Indeed, Mu Fan wanted to kill Xiao Chen and the others in one fell swoop. After doing all this, Mu Fan didn't stay any longer. He immediately drove the Starry Sky battleship away. Seeing that Mu Fan had left, the Celestial Reverend didn't attack again. After the exchange of blows just now, the Immortal Reverend knew very well that he was no match for Mu Fan at all. Mu Fan had easily blocked his attack with his full strength. This meant that Mu Fan's strength was definitely above his. As he watched Mu Fan leave, the Celestial Prime was not thinking about whether he should keep Mu Fan, but whether what Mu Fan had said was true or false. If it was true, then this was indeed a great opportunity for the Eight Desolate. An opportunity to severely injure the Hachibara Senkai. If they could kill all the heirs of the Hachibara Senkai in one fell swoop, it would undoubtedly be a heavy blow to the Hachibara Senkai. After all, the Hachibara Senkai had spent an astronomical amount of resources to cultivate Xiao Qin and the other heirs of the heirs. Holding the letter that Mu Fan had just sent to him, the Immortal Reverend was stunned for a while. Then, he hurriedly said, "I'm going to see the elders. You guys guard the entrance." This was a matter of great importance, so the Immortal Reverend didn't dare to make a decision on his own. Naturally, he could only report the matter truthfully to the elders of the Third Desolates. As soon as he finished speaking, the Immortal Reverend rushed into the Third Desolate. On a continent in the middle of the Third Desolates, where the elders of the Third Desolates were located. Because the Third Desolates' will of the heavenly way go to the Seventh Desolates, all the matters in the Third Desolates were decided by the elders. In a golden palace, the Immortal Reverend met the two elders of the Third Desolate. There were a total of 10 elders in the Third Desolate. At this moment, 2 of them received the Immortal Reverend and hurriedly led him into the main hall. One of the elders asked faintly, "Why are you in such a hurry?" Elder, a mysterious man, came to the entrance of the Third Desolates on a spaceship of the Hachibara Senkai and told me a piece of news. It's a matter of great importance, so I didn't dare to make a decision on my own. I'm here to report it to you, the Immortal Reverend replied respectfully. A mysterious man from the Hachibara Senkai had come to the Third Desolates? And he even told us a piece of important news? Upon hearing the Immortal Venerable's words, the 2 elders looked at each other, and the elder who had spoken earlier asked with a serious expression on his face, "What news?" In the face of the elder's inquiry, the Celestial Master did not dare to hide anything. He immediately told the 2 elders about the information that Mu Fan had given him. Finally, he personally handed the letter that Mu Fan had given him to the 2 elders. The letter had detailed information about the location of Xiao Qin and the others. It also mentioned that there was a force of living beings there. Unfortunately, it had already been obtained by the Hachibara Senkai. After reading the letter, the 2 elders fell silent. They had to admit that this news was indeed of great importance. The heirs of the Hachibara Senkai had gathered in the Second Desolates, and none of them were protected by the older experts of the Hachibara Senkai. This was indeed a great opportunity. The 2 elders seemed to be weighing the pros and cons in their hearts. Since the 2 elders did not speak, the Immortal Reverend naturally did not dare to speak. For a moment, the main hall fell into an eerie silence. This silence caused one to feel extremely pressured. It continued for around 10 minutes before one of the elders finally opened his mouth and asked. However, there was an additional trace of graveness in his voice at this moment. "You don't know the identity of the person who came?" Because Mu Fan was wearing a mask, he couldn't reveal his aura. Therefore, the Celestial Prime couldn't see through Mu Fan's identity. He only knew that the starship Mu Fan was on belonged to the 8th Desolation Immortal World. That person is wearing a mask, so I don't know his identity, but I'm sure that the starship he's on is definitely unique to the 8th Desolate Immortal World, the Immortal Venerable answered respectfully when he heard the elder's question. He did not know the identity of the person who came, and he could not confirm the authenticity of the information. Also, since the person came on a starship that belonged to the Hachibra Senkai, could he be a member of the Hachibra Senkai? However, if he was really a member of the Hachibra Senkai, why would he deliberately send such a message? Could he have betrayed the Hachibra Senkai? Or was there something else going on? There were too many suspicious points. For a moment, the two elders could not make up their minds. Please bookmark, vote, recommend. Chapter 1834. Although Mu Fan's information was very tempting, the two elders were not fools. Since the other party came on a spaceship of the Hachibra Senkai, it was very likely that he was a member of the Hachibra Senkai. What if this was a conspiracy by the Hachibra Senkai? It was not impossible for them to deliberately lure the experts from the 8 desolates to the 2nd desolates and then set up an ambush to kill them. After all, given the relationship between the Hachibra Senkai and the 8 desolates, they could use any means. It was normal for them to spread false information and then take the opportunity to ambush and kill them. On one hand, the information was very tempting. On the other hand, they were worried that this was a trap set by the Hachibra Senkai. Therefore, the two elders were in a dilemma. They could not make up their minds. After pondering for a while, one of them waved his hand and said to the immortal Reverend, "You can leave now. No matter what you have contributed. When the will of the heavenly way returns, I will personally ask for your reward." Hearing the elder's words, the immortal Reverend nodded respectfully and then left the hall. After the immortal Reverend left, the two elders began to discuss. "What do you think now?" "I think this is an opportunity, an excellent opportunity. If we can kill the heirs of the Hachibra Senkai in one fell swoop, even if we can't kill all of them, it can be considered a great gain." "I think so too, but we can't let our guard down. Maybe this is a trick by the Hachibra Senkai? They set up an ambush and are waiting for us to arrive." "That's true, but I think we can give it a try. Wealth comes from danger. No matter what, I don't think we should let go of this opportunity." "Well, what about the will of the heavenly way? Should we inform him?" "The will of the heavenly way is in the 7th desolate. It's useless to inform him. It takes too long to come and go. I think it's better for us to make the decision ourselves." "If that's the case, let's discuss with the other old guys and see what they think." "Sure." Both of them were on guard, but they were unwilling to give up this opportunity. After all, such an opportunity was hard to come by. Anyone would regret it if they missed it. Those who could become celestial emperors were naturally bold and meticulous. Therefore, after a simple discussion, they were somewhat moved. However, they weren't the only two elders in the 3rd desolate land. Today, the will wasn't here. Therefore, they had to seek the opinions of the other 8 elders if they wanted to take action. Immediately, the two of them sent a message to the other 8 elders of the 3rd desolation, asking them to come to the Great Hall for a meeting. Not long after, the 10 great elders gathered in the Great Hall. Looking at the two of them, the 8 elders who came later all asked curiously, "What's the matter? Why did the two of you summon us so urgently?" Since the two of them had gathered everyone here so urgently, it was obvious that something big had happened. Hearing this, the two of them passed Mu Fan's letter to the 8 of them and then explained the situation in detail. At the end, one of them said with a serious expression, "That's how it is. What do you think?" Hearing that there was actually such a thing, the 8 elders who came later all frowned. It was obvious that they were thinking about the feasibility of this news. After a while, one of them spoke. "This is indeed a great opportunity. However, like all of you, this could be a trap by the Hachibra Senkai. It's possible, but are we going to give up on this opportunity?" Another elder said, "I don't think we should give up. How can we succeed if we are always afraid of the wolf in front and the tiger behind? Since we have such an opportunity now, we just need to be on guard." "I think we should take action," another elder said. Although they were worried that this might be a trap by the Hachibra Senkai, after a discussion, Most of them felt that they should seize this opportunity. After all, nothing in this world was guaranteed. Everything had its risk. It all depended on whether the reward was worth it. To the elders, if they could kill a bunch of heirs from the 8-barren immortal world, it was worth the risk. Of course, they didn't mean that they didn't need to prepare at all. They just rushed into the 2nd barren immortal world like that. Everyone felt that they should take action. They could not let this great opportunity go to waste. After a discussion, the 10 elders decided to take action. However, they had to be on guard against the Hachibara Senkai. According to the elders, they would split into 2 teams, one at the front and one at the back. The great sage would lead the way for the team in front. Of course, there was no need to tell them anything. They were only told to go to the location that Mu Fan had given them to check it out. To put it simply, the great sage in front would be cannon fodder. If this was really a trap by the Hachibara Senkai, they would definitely be attacked. Then, the elders and the strong cultivators of the 3rd wilderness, who were far behind, would be able to retreat easily. On the other hand, if nothing strange happened along the way, and there were indeed many heirs at the location that Mu Fan had given them, they would attack and kill the Hachibara Senkai's heirs. The elders had no objections to this plan. In the end, they had to decide how many people to send to the 2nd wilderness. They did not need to think too much about the cannon fodder at the front. They only needed a few the great sage. As for how many people to send later, that would require planning. After a discussion, the 10 elders of the 3rd wilderness decided to send 7 elders to personally lead the team. In addition, they would also send 20 strong cultivators who had completed the Immortal Venerables. There were a total of 27 people. Although it was not a large number, all of them were strong cultivators. Such a force should be enough to deal with the heirs of the Hachibara Senkai. The 3rd wilderness had a total of 10 elders. This time, 7 of them would be sent. As for the remaining 3, they would naturally leave the 3rd wilderness alone. After all, the 3rd wilderness was adjacent to the 1st wilderness. It was impossible that there would be no immortal emperor guarding it. After reaching an agreement, 2 starships flew out from the 3rd wilderness, one after the other. Xiao Chun and the others were still unaware of Mu Fan's actions in the 3rd wilderness. Moreover, they did not know that danger was getting closer and closer to them. A total of 7 immortal emperors and 20 strong cultivators, who had completed the Immortal Venerables, were rushing towards the 2nd wilderness. Such a force was not something that Xiao Chun and the others could contend with. Although Xiao Chun and the others were heirs, it was still impossible for them to deal with the immortal emperors. After all, there was a gap of 2 realms between them. The difference in cultivation was too great. Please add vote recommend. Chapter 1835. Xiao Chun and the others obviously did not expect that Mu Fan would not hesitate to use the 8 desolates to kill them. This was definitely a taboo. Previously, no matter what Mu Fan did, everyone only thought that it was because of his personality. Although Mu Fan had almost killed Yi Xiao several times, which made Yi Xiao hate him to the core, other than Xiao Chun and Yi Xiao, Guan Hong and the others did not hate Mu Fan. Of course, they had some opinions, but they definitely did not hate him. After all, they were all heirs of Hachibara Senkai, so such a small matter would not make Guan Hong and the others hate Mu Fan. Everything that had happened before could be attributed to private fights or personal grudges between them. However, this time, Mu Fan had leaked the news to the 8 desolates and wanted to use the 8 desolates to get rid of Xiao Chun and the others. This was definitely crossing the line. Once people knew about it, even Guan Hong and the others would not let Mu Fan go. Unfortunately, until now, no one knew what Mu Fan had done. They also did not know that the 7 Immortal Emperor Realm Elders of the 3rd Wilderness had brought 20 Immortal Venerables, who were in the complete Immortal Venerables realm, to the 2nd Wilderness. They were completely unprepared. Everyone was still guarding outside the force of living beings, waiting for Hong Xiu to come out of seclusion. Days passed. In the second wilderness there was no spiritual chi of heaven and earth, so no one could cultivate at all. They could only gather together to drink and chat every day. Since there was no way to cultivate, they could only drink and chat. However, such days were leisurely. To be honest, with such an opportunity, everyone, including Xiao Chen, could relax. After all, as heirs of heirs, they did not have an easy time in the Hachibra Senkai. First, it was because of their cultivation. As heirs of heirs, no one wanted to be left behind by their peers. Therefore, everyone cultivated with all their might. Secondly, there were many troublesome matters in the various realms that required the heirs of heirs to deal with. As a result, the heirs of heirs did not really have much free time. Of course, among the heirs of heirs, Xiao Chen was probably the one with the most free time. This was because Xiao Chen basically left the matters of the seventh realm to Yu Shujin to deal with. He would not intervene unless there was something that Yu Shujin could not decide. Only then would Xiao Chen step in. What Xiao Chen really spent most of his time on was his training, which he immersed himself in every day. During this period of time, Xiao Chen was unable to cultivate due to the absence of the spirit chi of heaven and earth. It was rare for him to get together with everyone to chat and drink. However, such a gathering had really brought everyone closer to each other, and everyone could feel it. However, Xiao Chen and the others clearly did not realize that danger was constantly approaching. The experts of the third wilderness were getting closer and closer to the second wilderness. Time passed day by day. There was still no news from Hongxiu. Of course, Xiao Chen and the others were not too worried about this. After all, it was still early. It had not even been a month. Hongxiu obviously could not refine the power of living beings in such a short time. They could only wait patiently. After all, no one could interfere with Hongxiu now. The light gate had long disappeared. Hongxiu was refining the power of living beings alone. As Xiao Chen and the others waited patiently, a few days passed. On this day, a starship quietly flew into the second wilderness. This starship naturally came from the third wilderness. However, there were only 2 great saint sovereigns and 3 quasi-saint great sovereigns on this starship. They flew all the way to the second desolate. At this moment, the 2 great saint sovereigns were sitting together and chatting casually. What do you think is in the second wilderness? Why were we sent to explore, and even the location was given to us? One of them asked doubtfully. The 5 people on this starship were the cannon fodder prepared by the elders. If the Hachibra Senkai had an ambush, they would undoubtedly die. The other starship behind them could retreat easily. However, the great sage obviously didn't know this. They didn't even know that there was a starship behind them. They only knew that they came to the second wilderness under orders to search. As for what they were searching for, they didn't know. It could be said that they were in the dark. Other than the location, the great sage knew nothing. They only knew that they had to hurry to this location. They sped through the second wilderness and did not encounter any ambushes along the way. There was nothing out of the ordinary. At this time, the elders of the third wilderness, who were far behind, decided to speed up and rush to where Xiao Chen and the others were. The 2 sides were already very close. At the same time, the great sage and the 3 quasi-sage great masters in front were about to reach where Xiao Chen and the others were. The sudden appearance of a starship naturally attracted Xiao Chen's attention. At this time, Xiao Chen and the others had already discovered the starship. They gathered together and the heirs said with a serious expression, "It's a starship from the third wilderness. What should we do?" Guan Hong was the first to speak. "Can you confirm how many people there are?" Quan Fong asked. "I don't know yet, but it's just a starship. There shouldn't be many people," Chiu Ru replied. It was a genius from the 5th realm who discovered the starship, so Chiu Ru obviously knew the situation best. It was just a starship. Therefore, even if it was fully loaded, there shouldn't be many people. Hearing Qiu Ru's words, Lu Xiao, who had been silent all this time, spoke up. The only question now is, why did this starship appear here? Did it come here specifically, or did it just happen to pass by? Has our position been exposed? If that's the case, then we're in danger. First of all, they had to figure out whether this starship was just passing by or coming directly for them. The difference between the two was huge. If it was just passing by, they could just kill it directly. But if it was coming for Xiao Qin and the others, they had to be careful. After all, they didn't have the protection of the older generation of Hachibara Senkai. If they were surrounded and killed by the 8 barons, the result would probably be disastrous. Everyone agreed with Lu Xiao. Then Fu Rui took the initiative to say, "Let's try and find out. I'll take some people to try. Please add vote recommend." Chapter 1836. Fu Rui's method was indeed the simplest. They just had to give it a try to find out if the starship was just passing by or if it was purposely coming for Xiao Qin and the others. If the starship was weak, it obviously wasn't coming for them. On the other hand, if the starship was well prepared, it was obvious that the news about the second wilderness had been leaked. The 8 barons had come prepared to kill the heirs of Kunlun. Hearing Fu Rui's words, everyone nodded. Finally, after some discussion, Fu Rui, Qiu Ru, and Quan Feng decided to lead their young geniuses to test the starship first. As for the others, they would support them in the dark. If the starship was too weak, they would eliminate it directly. With the decision made, everyone began to prepare. At the same time, Guan Hong, the kind old man, had purposely found Xiao Qin and Yi Xiao. Apparently, he had something to say. "Brother Xiao Qin, brother Yi Xiao, Guan Hong hesitated as he looked at the two of them. Seeing this, a strange glint flashed across Xiao Qin's eyes, as if he had already guessed what Guan Hong wanted to say. On the other hand, Yi Xiao, who was beside him, said heartlessly, "Brother Guan Hong, if you have something to say, just say it. Why are you hemming and hawing?" Yi Xiao didn't notice anything. Seeing this, Guan Hong exhorted for a moment. Then, he looked up at the two and said in one breath, "Brother Xiao Qin, brother Yi Xiao, there's something I think we should make plans for. If the news about the second wilderness has been leaked and the 8 barons have come prepared, then we should prepare to evacuate. After all, we can't fight against the 8 barons by ourselves. Besides, we don't have any strong Hachibara Senkai accompanying us." When Guan Hong mentioned the evacuation, Nightingale said nonchalantly, "That's for sure. If Bahuang came prepared, we will definitely evacuate. Don't tell me we're just going to wait for our deaths here." Yi Xiao didn't react at first, but when he said that, he was stunned. Retreating meant giving up on Hong Xiu. Because Hong Xiu was now in the force of living beings, it was impossible to take her away. Once everyone was gone, Hong Xiu would not know what was going on outside. Once she came out, she would definitely be captured by the 8 Desolate. As for asking for help from the Hachibara Senkai, it was obviously too late. Even if he used the voice-transmitting charm, it would be too late by the time the Hachibara Senkai experts arrived. It was also for this reason that Guan Hong had a hesitant look on his face. His expression instantly turned ugly. Yi Xiao could not help but turn to look at Xiao Qin. Seeing this, Xiao Qin said with a solemn expression, "Let's observe the situation first." Indeed, what Guan Hong said would happen. If the news about the second barons was leaked, the best choice for everyone would be to evacuate. But this way, it would mean that they had given up on Hong Xiu. This matter was unsolvable and Xiao Qin had no solution. However, Xiao Qin had decided that if the news about the second barons was leaked, Xiao Qin would definitely stay behind. Even if he wasn't a match for the 8 barons, he wouldn't abandon Hong Xiu. When Xiao Qing, Bai Ruyue and Qin Shuru died, Xiao Qin swore that from then on, he would never abandon anyone by his side and escape. Therefore, if the news was leaked, Xiao Chen would stay behind alone and get the others to evacuate. As for the outcome, Xiao Chen didn't care. At most, he would die here with Hong Xiu. He wouldn't abandon anyone and didn't want to suffer the pain of losing someone by his side. Of course, Xiao Chen couldn't tell anyone about this decision. He spoke to appease Yi Xiao. Hearing this, Guan Hong nodded silently. Then, the group headed towards the starship. Fu Rui, Qiu Ru, and Lu Xiao led the attack while the others hid in the surroundings to provide support. It was just a test. As soon as they started fighting, Xiao Chen and the others found that there were only 5 people on the starship. Moreover, the strongest were only 2 the Great Sage. This kind of strength was no threat to them at all. They easily dealt with the 5 people and destroyed their starship. Everyone returned and gathered together. At this time, everyone couldn't help but secretly sigh in relief. It seems that we were overthinking. The news shouldn't have leaked. This starship must have passed by chance, Lu Xiao said to everyone. That should be the case. Maybe the 8 Desolations is also searching for the second desolation. Qiu Ru nodded in agreement. Everyone thought that the matter was over, but Xiao Chen didn't say anything. Intuition told Xiao Chen that things weren't so simple. All along, Xiao Chen's intuition had been very sharp and accurate. At this time, Xiao Chen's intuition kept telling him that a great danger was approaching them. There was a trace of uneasiness in his heart, but Xiao Chen couldn't tell where this feeling came from. Therefore, Xiao Chen was at a loss. After dealing with the starship from the 3rd desolation, everyone was temporarily relieved. After a simple discussion, they dispersed. At this time, Xiao Chen came to the deck alone. He looked at the darkness around him with a faint light in his eyes. No one knew what he was thinking. Just when Xiao Chen was alone in his thoughts, Long Qing came behind Xiao Chen and asked with concern, "What's wrong, little brother?" In fact, when everyone was discussing before, Long Qing had already noticed Xiao Chen's abnormality. After all, as Xiao Chen's second sister, Long Qing knew Xiao Chen very well. Unfortunately, in the face of Long Qing's question, Xiao Chen shook his head and didn't answer. Seeing this, Long Qing didn't ask anymore. She came to Xiao Chen's side and said with a faint smile on her face, "Little brother, I will never leave you again." After hearing Long Qing's words, Xiao Chen smiled and the worries in his heart dissipated a lot. It was a silent night. On the second day, although there was no sun or moon in the second desolation, everyone still knew the time. Around noon, suddenly, another starship came into their sight. It was also from the 3rd desolation. Needless to say, this starship was naturally the one that the 7 elders of the 3rd desolation were on. They had already arrived. Xiao Chen and the others discovered it immediately, but it was too late. The danger had really arrived. The heirs gathered together again. Everyone had a look of confusion on their faces. Yi Xiao couldn't help but ask, "Why is there another one? What the hell is going on in the 3rd desolation?" Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 1837. Just one night later, another starship from the 3rd wasteland was flying towards them. Yi Xiao was very upset about this, but Xiao Chen, who was sitting next to him, said with a serious expression, "The news must have been leaked." Xiao Chen was sure that Ba Huang must have found out about what happened in the 2nd wasteland. Otherwise, why would there be starships appearing in the 2nd wasteland one after another? It would make sense if the starship from yesterday happened to pass by, but what about today? It was impossible to send 2 starships in a row. Yi Xiao still had some hope in his heart, but Xiao Chen was sure that Ba Huang must have found out about what happened and came here specifically for them. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Yi Xiao's face immediately darkened, and Fu Rui said, "What should we do then? Let's retreat. Judging from the current situation, Ba Huang must be prepared." "I'm afraid it will be difficult for us to deal with them," Xiao Chen said calmly. They didn't know how the news was leaked, but one thing was certain. Since Ba Huang came here specifically for them, it would be difficult for them to resist with their strength. Since the other party was prepared, Xiao Chen and the others couldn't fight head-on. They could only choose to retreat. Hearing this, the others didn't have any objections, but Yi Xiao said unwillingly, "Then what about junior sister? What about Hongxiu?" Yi Xiao was most concerned about Hongxiu. Hearing this, Xiao Chen chose to remain silent. Because once they retreated, Hongxiu would naturally be abandoned. However, there was something that Xiao Chen had yet to tell everyone. That was, Xiao Chen's intention was for everyone to evacuate while he stayed behind. Xiao Chen didn't tell everyone what he was thinking. After a moment of silence, Xiao Chen said, "There's no time to lose. Get ready as soon as possible." Hearing this, Guan Hong and the others dispersed and immediately began to prepare to leave. At the same time, on the same starship, Yi Xiao looked at Xiao Chen unhappily after Guan Hong and the others left. "Xiao Chen, are you going to give up on your junior sister just like that?" Hongxiu was still in the force of living beings. If everyone left, wouldn't Hongxiu be finished? If she fell into the hands of the 8 desolates, her fate would be obvious. In the face of Yi Xiao's displeasure, Xiao Chen's expression did not change much. He just said calmly, "If we stay, we will all die here." After saying that, Xiao Chen didn't care about Yi Xiao's attitude. He turned around and left. Seeing Xiao Chen's departing figure, Yi Xiao's eyes flashed with anger. From Yi Xiao's point of view, it was unacceptable that Xiao Chen had given up on Hongxiu so decisively. Hongxiu had always treated Xiao Chen so well, but now that danger had arrived, Xiao Chen had actually fled. Yi Xiao obviously didn't know what Xiao Chen was thinking. Xiao Chen's idea was very simple. He couldn't let everyone stay and die. Since the 8 desolates already knew about the second desolates, they must have made preparations. Under such circumstances, even if everyone stayed here, they would probably be wiped out in the end. He could stay here alone. Anyway, the result would be the same. It was better to stay alone than to be wiped out. Xiao Chen went all the way to the cockpit of the starship. He instructed one of the 7th Realm's Sky Prides to follow the route that everyone had discussed. He didn't need to worry about anything. He just needed to pilot the starship and do his best. After doing all this, Xiao Chen returned to his room alone and left a letter for Long Qing and Xian Yuanling. His purpose was to tell them that they must treat Luan Luan well, not only because of Luan Luan, but also because Luan Luan might be the key to resurrecting Qin Shiru and the others. Xiao Chen couldn't abandon Hongxiu and escape by himself, so he naturally had to tell them these things. As for Xiao Chen's actions, no one else noticed anything. Soon, about 15 minutes later, all the heirs were ready. The 6 starships started moving slowly and started retreating in the direction that they had agreed on. On the 7th Realm starship, Yi Xiao looked furious. There were several times when he wanted to take his people and leave directly to guard Hongxiu. However, Long Qing and Xian Yuanling stopped him. Although no one wanted to abandon Hongxiu directly, Xiao Chen was right. Everyone would probably die in the end if they stayed. Long Qing and Xian Yuanling stopped Yi Xiao. Facing the furious Yi Xiao, Xian Yuanling tried to comfort him. "Yi Xiao, if we stay here, we'll die. Only by staying alive can we save Hongxiu in the future." *T. Don't you know what will happen if Hongxiu falls into the hands of the 8 Baron? Yi Xiao immediately shouted angrily. Facing Yi Xiao's angry shout, Long Qing continued, "The 8 Baron might not kill Hongxiu directly. They might capture her. Then, we'll have a chance to save her. Ba Huang might not have directly killed Hongxiu after saving her." Yi Xiao was slightly taken aback when he heard this. That was indeed a possibility. However, when he thought that he was about to abandon Hongxiu, Yi Xiao felt extremely conflicted. Looking around, he didn't see Xiao Chen at all. Yi Xiao said coldly, "Where's Xiao Chen? Where did he run off to at this time?" Xiao Chen didn't even appear. Yi Xiao didn't know why, but he was furious. He felt that Xiao Chen didn't care about Hongxiu at all. In the face of Yi Zhao's questioning, Long Qing replied, "Little brother is in his room. Yi Xiao, I'm sure he's more upset than you are." Long Qing naturally wanted to speak up for Xiao Chen. Yi Xiao snorted coldly but didn't say anything else. Seeing this, Xian Yuanling said slowly, "There's only hope if we're alive. If we're all dead, who's going to save Hongxiu?" There was only hope if they were alive. Yi Xiao fell silent when he heard Xian Yuanling's words. The 6 spaceships immediately set off and began to break out of the encirclement. At the same time, the 7 elders of the Third Baron were rushing towards the location that Mu Fan had provided. At the same time, they had sent a few immortal sovereigns to investigate ahead of time. It had to be said that the 7 elders of the Third Desolation were very cautious because they were afraid that this might be a conspiracy of the 8th Desolation immortal realm. It was because of this caution that Xiao Chen and the others had a chance to escape. At this time, everyone had already retreated. The 7 elders of the Third Baron also received the news at this time. In the spaceship, an immortal sovereign said respectfully, "Elder, we've discovered 6 spaceships of the Hachibra Senkai, but they seem to have escaped. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 1838. Out of caution, the 7 elders did not rush over immediately. Instead, they sent a few celestial primes to check the situation first. When they heard that there were 6 spaceships from the 8th Desolation immortal world that were preparing to escape, the 7 elders' faces changed. At this moment, they were finally certain that the news that Mu Fan had given them was true. One of the elders stood up abruptly and said with a gloomy face, "Surround them, quick." If the news was true, then this was definitely a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. They could not let the heirs of Hachibra Senkai escape. Hearing this, the immortal venerables nodded respectfully and replied, "Yes, we have already taken action to delay them." The few immortal venerables who had rushed over to check the situation decided to take action immediately after they found out that the news was true. They wanted to delay Xiao Chen and the others. They should have already started fighting by now. Hearing the immortal venerable's words, the elder nodded and said, "All right, we will rush over immediately." Soon, the 7 elders from the Third Desolation made their arrangement. 4 of them abandoned their spaceships and led 10 immortal venerables to take a detour in front of Xiao Chen and the others. The remaining 3 surrounded Xiao Chen and the others. They were determined to surround Xiao Chen and the others. They could not give the heirs of Hachibra Senkai the slightest chance to break out of the encirclement. Unfortunately, as the saying goes, 1 step too slow, 1 step too slow. The 7 elders' initial caution and hesitation had caused them to miss the best opportunity to surround Xiao Chen and the others. On the other hand, Xiao Chen's prompt decision to let them break out of the encirclement was also the last chance to survive. While the 7 elders from the Third Desolation were making their arrangements, Guan Hong and the others had already started fighting with the immortal venerables from the Third Desolation. The 6 spaceships started moving at full speed and broke out of the encirclement. At the same time, Guan Hong, Fu Rui, Qiu Ru, Quan Feng, Lu Xiao, and Yi Xiao also took action. There were a total of 4 immortal venerables from the Third Desolate, trying to hold them back. Everyone knew that they absolutely couldn't stop now. Otherwise, it would be very difficult for them to break out of the encirclement once they were surrounded. Obviously, Guan Hong was at a disadvantage in the fierce battle with an immortal venerable. Fortunately, his opponent was only at the great perfection immortal venerable realm. Although Guan Hong was no match for him, he could still contend with him for a while. While fighting fiercely, Guan Hong shouted angrily at the geniuses of various realms who were in charge of piloting the starship, "Don't stop, charge forward." Many heirs blocked the 4 immortal primes from the Third Baron territory, not giving them a chance to attack the starship. Now, the starship was their only hope of survival. This was because the speed of a starship was definitely faster than a cultivator. As long as they successfully rushed out, their speed would increase. At that time, even an immortal emperor wouldn't be able to catch up with them. Therefore, the only thing that Guan Hong and the others needed to do was to protect the starship and escape successfully. Upon hearing Guan Hong's shout, the geniuses of various realms who were in charge of piloting the starship didn't hesitate at all. They immediately went all out, trying to break through the blockade of the four immortal primes. Seeing that Guan Hong and the others were about to break through the blockade, the four immortal primes' hearts sank. Their attacks became more and more terrifying, intending to stop Guan Hong and the others at the cost of their lives. Both sides calmly went all out. However, in the third barren territory, due to the caution of the seven elders, they were still one step behind. Therefore, it was indeed a little difficult for the four immortal primes to stop Guan Hong and the others. It should be known that as heirs of heirs, Guan Hong and the others were not only powerful, but they also had countless treasures. Seeing that the 6 starships had broken through the blockade of the 4 immortal primes, Guan Hong and the others didn't hesitate and immediately used their life-saving trump card. Although these life-saving trump cards couldn't kill the 4 perfected immortal venerables, it was still enough to force them to retreat. At this moment, Guan Hong and the others didn't hesitate to use the life-saving trump cards that they usually couldn't bear to use. Upon seeing this, the faces of the 4 celestial venerables darkened. However, there was nothing they could do as they were sent flying away. At the same time, Guan Hong and the others seized the opportunity to return to their spaceship. Then, the 6 spaceships started to move at full speed, vanishing from the spot in just a blink of an eye. The starships that the heirs of heirs were on were definitely the best starships in the Hachibra Senkai. Not to mention immortal emperors, even the sector lords and the will of the heavenly way couldn't catch up with them. It was common knowledge that the starships were faster than the cultivators themselves. Seeing the starships disappear quickly, the 4 immortal primes who had been injured by the life-saving trump cards of Guan Hong and the others couldn't care less about their injuries. Their eyes were filled with unwillingness and anger as they stared in the direction where Guan Hong and the others had retreated. They couldn't believe that they had let such a great opportunity slip away. Less than 10 breaths of time after Guan Hong and the others had escaped, the 4 elders of the Third Wilderness arrived with 10 immortal primes. Looking at the battle that had ended and the 6 starships that had disappeared, the 4 elders' faces were extremely gloomy. One of them said coldly, "They ran away?" Hearing this, the 4 immortal venerables lowered their heads and remained silent. Seeing this, even though the elder was furious, he knew that they had done their best when he saw the injuries on their bodies. They could only blame themselves for being a step too late. Because they had retreated in time, Guan Hong and the others had managed to escape. They were all secretly relieved as they sat on the starship. However, on the starship of the 7th world, Yi Shao wasn't happy at all. On the contrary, Yi Shao came to Xiao Chen's room with a gloomy face. Ignoring Long Qing and Xian Yuan Ling's attempts to stop him, he pushed open the door and shouted angrily, "Xiao Chen, come out now." Yi Shao was already furious when Xiao Chen decided to give up on Hong Xiu without hesitation. Just now, when everyone was fighting fiercely, Xiao Chen didn't appear from the beginning to the end. At that time, they didn't have time to care about this. Now that they had successfully broken out of the encirclement, Yi Shao came to question Xiao Chen angrily. Unfortunately, in the face of Yi Zhao's angry shout, there was no response from the room. Xiao Chen was nowhere to be found in Xiao Chen's room. After looking around, there was no one in the room except for a letter on the table. Long Qing and Xian Yuan Ling were stunned when they saw this. They had a bad premonition in their hearts. Ignoring Yi Shao, they immediately came to the table, picked up the letter that Xiao Chen left behind, and read it. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1839. The content of Xiao Chen's letter was simple. He told Long Qing and Xianyuan Ling that he would stay behind to protect Hongxiu. Big brother, second sister, I've chosen to stay behind. I've experienced the pain of losing someone by my side once, and I'm not willing to abandon anyone else. Don't worry. If I'm safe, I will return to the first wilderness myself. If I die, big brother, second sister, please take care of Luan Luan for me. She is the chance to revive Shuru and the others. In the future, I may need to trouble big brother and second sister to take care of them. It was an extremely simple sentence without the slightest bit of emotion. It was as though he was stating a simple fact. Long Qing and Xianyuan Ling finally understood Xiao Chen's intentions. Xiao Chen had asked everyone to evacuate while Long Qing and Xianyuan Ling stayed behind. From the start, Xiao Chen knew that even if everyone stayed behind, the outcome would still be the same. They would definitely be wiped out. That was why Xiao Chen allowed everyone to break out of the encirclement while he stayed behind alone. Xiao Chen chose to stay behind because he wasn't willing to abandon Hongxiu. After all, no matter what, it wouldn't feel good to be abandoned. Besides, Xiao Chen wasn't willing to abandon anyone else by his side. That was why, even though Xiao Chen knew that he would die, he was willing to stay behind to accompany Hongxiu. Both of them stood on the spot blankly. Upon seeing this, Yi Xiao approached them dubiously. When he saw the letter in Long Qing's hand, Yi Xiao finally understood what was going on. It turned out that Xiao Chen had no intention of abandoning Hongxiu and escaping alone. The reason why he said that was because he wanted everyone to leave as soon as possible. There was no need for everyone to die together. It was better to die alone than to die together. It was enough for him to accompany Hongxiu alone. Apparently, he had misunderstood Xiao Chen. Yi Xiao froze on the spot. At the same time, after a brief moment of absent-mindedness, Long Qing suddenly said, "No, I have to go back and save my younger brother." Xiao Chen didn't want to abandon anyone around him, and Long Qing was the same. Therefore, after learning that Xiao Chen chose to stay alone, Long Qing's first reaction was to go back. Hearing Long Qing's words, Xianyuan Ling did not have the slightest objection. Immediately, the two of them prepared to pilot the starship back. However, after sensing the abnormality of the Seventh World's starship, Guan Hong and the others also rushed over. After learning that Xiao Chen had stayed behind alone, Guan Hong and the others worked together to stop Long Qing, Xianyuan Ling, and Yi Xiao from going back to die in vain. They knew how the three of them felt and could empathize with them. However, now that they had broken out of the encirclement, if Long Qing and the others turned back, they would only die with Xiao Chen. Knowing that they would die, Guan Hong and the others naturally could not let Long Qing and the others go. After subduing the three of them, the Seventh World's starship flew along the predetermined route. As for Xiao Chen, although Guan Hong and the others also felt bad, there was nothing they could do. If they went back now, they would definitely be walking into a trap. Guan Hong and the others successfully escaped because of Xiao Chen's decisiveness. At this time, Guan Hong, Fu Rui, and Qiu Ru were on the Seventh World starship. As for Long Qing, Xianyuan Ling, and Yi Xiao, the three of them had been successfully subdued. With his cultivation sealed, Long Qing looked angrily at Guan Hong and the others in front of him and said, "Let go of me. I have to go save my little brother." Long Qing, calm down. We are also very sad about Xiao Chen's situation. However, if we go back now, what else can we do other than die with Xiao Chen? Guan Hong said with disappointment when he heard Long Qing's words. Xiao Chen let the others escape, but he chose to stay. This was not what Guan Hong had expected. No one had expected Xiao Chen to make such a choice. Guan Hong paused and then continued, "Xiao Chen let us escape. If we go back now, wouldn't Xiao Chen's good intentions go to waste? Moreover, if you die, who will take care of Luan Luan?" Luan Luan. Upon hearing this, Long Qing and Xianyuan Ling fell silent. Yes, Xiao Chen had already told them to take good care of Luan Luan. Luan Luan could be said to be the only hope of reviving Qin Shuru and the others. She was also Xiao Chen's hope. If the two of them died, who would take care of Luan Luan? Who would revive Qin Shuru and the others? Long Qing and Xianyuan Ling were silent. With regards to this, Guan Hong did not say anything. With the current situation, it was impossible for Guan Hong to have any misgivings about what the two of them were thinking. In any case, it was impossible for him to allow the two of them to return and die in vain. Without giving the two of them a choice, Guan Hong and the others forcibly brought Long Qing, Xianyuan Ling, and Yi Xiao out of the second wilderness. Now was not the time to relax. Who knew if the people from Ba Huang were still chasing after them? Therefore, they could not stop, let alone turn back. In fact, Guan Hong did not feel good about making such a choice. However, his rationality told him that he could not turn back, otherwise everyone would die. Guan Hong's caution was not wrong, because the 4 elders of the third wilderness had not given up. They were still chasing after them, but there was not much hope left. Even though the 4 of them were immortal emperors, it was still impossible for them to catch up with the spaceship. While Guan Hong and the others were fleeing, the spaceship of the third wilderness was rapidly approaching the force of living beings. The 3 elders on the starship had already received the news that Guan Hong and the others had broken out of the encirclement. Since they couldn't stop Guan Hong and the others, it was too late to chase after them. Therefore, the 3 elders piloted the starship and arrived outside the force of beings. From afar, the 3 of them could feel the qi of the force of living beings. One of them said regretfully, "What a pity! All our efforts were in vain in the end." Someone's here. Indeed, it was a pity. However, as soon as the elder's voice faded, another elder spoke anxiously. Someone. When the 3 elders heard that, they looked forward. Indeed, there was a person sitting in front of them. He was a branch family member, sitting alone in the starry sky. The spaceship slowly approached the person. This person was none other than Xiao Chen, who had chosen to stay behind alone. Apparently, the 3 elders knew Xiao Chen and recognized Xiao Chen's identity at first glance. Xiao Chen? The heir of the 7th realm? Xiao Chen, are you courting death? The others have already fled. Only you stayed behind. Xiao Chen, are you going to stay behind and stop us? Do you think you can do it? Or should I say you're courting death? The 3 elders sneered one after another. They did not expect that Xiao Chen was still here. For a moment, the 3 elders were in a good mood. Facing the 3 elders' sneers, Xiao Chen, who had been sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed, slowly opened his eyes. He looked at the 3 elders standing on the spaceship and said indifferently, "There are many things that you must do even though you know it's impossible. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation." Chapter 1840. At this moment, the starship of the third wilderness was slowly approaching Xiao Chen. Guan Hong and the others would definitely not be able to catch up with it. However, it was a pleasant surprise to meet Xiao Chen, the heir of the 7th realm. On the deck, the 3 elders and several eldest sons of immortal venerables were looking at Xiao Chen mockingly. As the heir of the Hachibra Senkai's 7th realm, Xiao Chen's combat strength was invincible among his peers. However, Xiao Chen was now facing 3 elders at the Immortal Emperor realm and several experts at the great perfection of the Immortal Venerable realm. Even if Xiao Chen was the heir of the 7th realm, what could he do against such a lineup? Upon hearing Xiao Chen's words, one of the elders sneered. "You know it's impossible, but you still want to do it? Haha, Xiao Chen, do you mean that you're courting death?" In fact, the 3 elders were also puzzled as to why Xiao Chen was here. Since Guan Hong and the others were able to break out of the encirclement, Xiao Chen definitely had a chance to escape. However, Xiao Chen did not leave. Instead, it seemed that Xiao Chun had taken the initiative to wait for their arrival. Since he could leave, why didn't Xiao Chun leave? In the face of the elder's mockery, Xiao Chen's expression did not change at all. He still said indifferently, "Courting death? Whatever. I just don't want to run anymore." Xiao Chun really didn't want to run anymore, especially not when he wanted to leave the people around him behind and run away alone. This time, Xiao Chun did have a chance to escape. As long as he followed Guan Hong and the others, Xiao Chun would definitely be able to escape from the second wilderness. However, what would happen after he escaped? Hong Xiu would be alone here. After she finished refining the power of living beings, what would she do if she saw the experts from the 8th wilderness when she came out? On the other hand, would she feel good about Xiao Chun? Instead of enduring such pain, Xiao Chun would rather stay. Even if he had to die, so what? His face was as calm as an ancient well. Upon seeing this, the elder from the 3rd desolate land, who had spoken earlier, was slightly taken aback. Soon after, he coldly laughed. "Ha ha, forget it. This old man does not wish to dwell on why you are here. However, since this is the case, I believe that handing you over to the 7th desolate land's will should be a good choice. I heard that you used to be the first holy son of the 7th wilderness, but later you defected to the Hachibra Sunkai." Although the 3 elders were curious as to why Xiao Chun was here, they did not dwell on it. Regardless of the reason, Xiao Chun had nowhere to run now. Capturing Xiao Chun and handing him over to the will of the Heavenly Way was indeed a great achievement. The 7th will of the Heavenly Way would probably be even happier. The 7th will of the Heavenly Way wanted to kill Xiao Chun. This was no secret in the 8th wilderness. They always wanted to kill Xiao Chun. Now that they had the opportunity to capture Xiao Chun and hand him over to the 7th will of the Heavenly Way, they would definitely reward him. Xiao Chun's eyes flashed with fighting spirit after hearing what the elder said. He then said plainly, "Let's do it." From the moment Xiao Chun decided to stay, he had never thought of doing so. Hearing Xiao Chun's words, the 3 elders of the 3rd wilderness's face darkened. Then they shouted coldly, "Take him down." The 3 elders had no intention of attacking. Xiao Chun was the only one present. There was no way for him to escape. Therefore, the 3 elders were enjoying the feeling of playing a game of cat and mouse. After all, Xiao Chun's identity wasn't ordinary. He was the heir of the 7th realm. He could be considered as the core figure of the Hachibra Senkai. Upon hearing the words of the 3 elders, several immortal venerables behind the 3 elders struck at the same time. There were a total of 6 of them, and it was impossible for Xiao Chun to deal with them. After all 6 of them had reached the great perfection of the immortal venerable realm. In a one-on-one situation, Xiao Chun wouldn't be able to defeat them. Now that he was facing 6 of them, Xiao Chun didn't stand a chance. However, Xiao Chun didn't show the slightest fear in the face of the 6 great perfection immortal venerables. With the Wuchen sword in hand, Xiao Chun's qi soared to the sky. At first, his qi was at the great perfection of the immortal realm. But soon, Xiao Chun's qi began to rise in an extremely violent manner, breaking through the great perfection of the immortal realm in a flash. Such an abnormal increase caused the expressions of the 3 elders from the 3rd wasteland on the starship to change. One of them even shouted with a solemn face, "Don't underestimate us. Ignite your bloodline." The abnormal rise in Xiao Chun's qi was obviously due to the ignition of his bloodline power. With the ignition of his bloodline power, Xiao Chun's qi became much stronger. At the same time, his face revealed an unnatural flush. Apparently, his qi had reached the great perfection of the immortal realm. In response, the elder who spoke earlier paused for a moment before continuing coldly. "So what? Xiao Chun, you're already a turtle in a jar today. There's no way you can escape." Facing the siege of 6 great perfection immortal venerables, Xiao Chun decisively ignited his bloodline power. It was indeed unexpected, but so what? Shao Chun still couldn't change anything. Not to mention the 3 immortal Emperor Elders, just the 6 Great Perfection Immortal Venerables weren't something that Shao Chun could deal with even by igniting his blood essence. However, Shao Chun had never thought of changing anything. Upon hearing the Elder's words, Shao Chun said indifferently, "I've never thought of running away. If I wanted to run away, I wouldn't have waited until now." Indeed, Shao Chun had never thought of running away. As soon as his voice faded, Shao Chun took the initiative to attack. He slashed out the Wu Chun sword in his hand. A blood-red sword light instantly shot towards one of the immortal venerables. After igniting his bloodline power, the power of Shao Chen's sword was much stronger than usual. In the face of Shao Chen's sword, the immortal venerable didn't dare to be careless. Immediately, he used all his strength to deal with Shao Chen's attack. The power of a single sword strike was already so powerful. At this moment, Shao Chen was indeed qualified to fight against a great perfection immortal venerable. Unfortunately, this qualification was under the premise of a one-on-one battle. At this moment, Shao Chen was facing 6 great perfection immortal venerables. He slashed out his sword at one of them. At the same time, the other 5 didn't stop. They had already besieged Shao Chen. Seeing the 5 of them attacking, the 3 elders on the deck shouted in unison, "Keep him alive! Capture him alive! Please collect, vote, recommend." Chapter 1841. In their opinion, Shao Chen was already a turtle in a jar. Therefore, capturing him alive was naturally more valuable than killing him. Moreover, it wasn't impossible to capture Shao Chen alive with 6 perfect immortal venerables attacking at the same time. The 6 immortal venerables understood what was going on after hearing the 3 elders' words. Except for the immortal venerable who was attacked by Shao Chen, the other 5 launched their attacks at Shao Chen at the same time. However, they didn't use their full strength. After all, the 3 elders had said that they wanted to capture him alive. Facing the attacks of the 5, the battle intent in Shao Chen's eyes intensified. Countless sharp sword chi condensed around him, forming countless blood-red sword rays that attacked the 5 elders at the same time. Countless sword rays erupted at the same time. Unfortunately, Shao Chen was facing 5 perfect immortal venerables. These blood-red sword rays couldn't withstand the attacks of the 5 elders and were quickly dispersed. Then, Shao Chen was also hit by the attacks of the 5 elders. Although the sword rays had helped Shao Chen neutralize a lot of the attacks, Shao Chen still spurted out a mouthful of blood after being hit by the attacks of the 5 immortal venerables at the same time. Apparently, he was seriously injured. In just one exchange, Shao Chen was completely at a disadvantage. Upon seeing this, the 3 elders on the deck sneered coldly. Those with great talent are indeed heaven's prides. However, talent is just talent after all, not combat strength. Before talent is transformed into combat strength, it still doesn't count. Shao Chen, the outcome has already been decided. Surrender now. The 3 elders weren't worried at all. There was no way Shao Chen could survive today. The outcome had already been decided. Shao Chen didn't respond to their words. Although he was seriously injured, Shao Chen didn't have the slightest intention of stopping. He forcefully suppressed the surging qi and blood in his body. Then, with Shao Chen as the center, Wu Chun swords appeared one after another in the surroundings. The sword realm was already Shao Chen's strongest move. At the same time, it was also Shao Chen's strongest state. The 3 elders and the 6 immortal reverends were taken aback when they saw the dustless swords appearing one after another. Then, they asked with a puzzled look on their faces, "Is this the sword realm?" "No, this isn't the power of a domain. It's not the sword realm." The 3 elders didn't know much about the sword realm. When Shao Chen first displayed the sword realm, the realm lords had to observe it for a long time before they could recognize it. However, their eyesight and knowledge weren't as good as Luo Li and the other realm lords. Therefore, under the cover of Shao Chen's sword realm, the three of them couldn't see that it was the sword realm. Or it could be said that they had never come into contact with the power of the sword realm. The means that Shao Chen displayed was somewhat beyond their understanding. However, at the same time, no one noticed that in the starry sky not far away from them, a white-haired old man with a ruddy complexion was watching everything with great interest. It was very strange. This old man was really strange because he wasn't hiding in the void at this moment. He was just standing there casually, but no one noticed his existence. It was as though a person was standing in front of you, but you couldn't see him at all. No one noticed the old man's existence at all. At the same time, the old man looked at Shao Chen, who displayed the sword realm with a faint smile and said, "Sword body, sword realm. Interesting, interesting." The old man seemed to be very interested in Shao Chen. However, very soon, the old man shook his head and smiled when he saw Shao Chen display the sword realm. This little guy still doesn't know how to use the sword realm and the power of the sword body. However, it's not his fault. I guess no one in this world knows about the sword body. Shao Chen didn't know about the old man's existence, nor did he know the old man's evaluation of him. To be honest, perhaps Shao Chen really didn't know how to display and use the sword body and sword realm because no one taught him. All along, Shao Chen had been comprehending them by himself. Even Luo Li couldn't teach him anything about the sword body and sword realm because Luo Li had only read about the sword body in an ancient book, and it was only a brief introduction. If he comprehended it by himself, he would inevitably take a detour. However, there was no other way. Shao Chen could only do this. After displaying the sword realm, Shao Chen didn't retreat. Instead, he advanced and immediately engaged in a fierce battle with the 6 immortal venerables. Both of his hands were holding the Wu Chen sword tightly. Every slash was equivalent to a strike of the 9 nether sword art. Its power was extremely terrifying. Shao Chen didn't have the slightest intention of retreating. On the other hand, the 6 immortal venerables were somewhat puzzled and even surprised because they had never come into contact with the sword realm. However, as the 3 elders behind them reprimanded them, the 6 of them quickly calmed down. Don't worry about what means this kid has used. After all, his cultivation base is only at the immortal realm. What's there to be afraid of if the 6 of you join forces? The 3 elders shouted angrily. The 6 of them were stunned when they heard the elders' words. After giving it a thought, they realized that the elders' words made sense. The 6 of them were at the perfect immortal venerable realm. No matter what means Shao Chen used, there was no reason for them to be afraid. Immediately, the 6 of them no longer hesitated and attacked Shao Chen together. For a moment, the 7 of them engaged in a fierce battle. They thought that it wouldn't be too difficult to capture Shao Chen with 6 immortal venerables in the Great Perfection Immortal Venerables. However, Shao Chen still hadn't been defeated even after half an hour had passed. He was still exchanging blows with the 6 of them. As time went by, the 3 elders of the 3rd Desolate couldn't sit still any longer. This didn't make sense. It had been half an hour, but they still hadn't captured Shao Chen. How could this be possible? Moreover, after half an hour of fierce battle, the injuries on Shao Chen's body were extremely serious. Logically speaking, Shao Chen should have lost the ability to fight. However, why was Shao Chen still able to fight? Moreover, his combat strength didn't decrease at all. That's right. Shao Chen's injuries were getting more and more serious as time went by, but his combat strength didn't decrease at all. On the contrary, it seemed to be increasing. Shao Chen's combat prowess had increased instead of decreased. This was absolutely illogical. The 3 elders were puzzled. However, the mysterious old man who had been watching the battle from the side stared at Shao Chen thoughtfully. He watched Shao Chen continuously slash out attacks. After a while, the old man sighed and said, "He's already lost consciousness? This little guy is really stubborn. He has already lost consciousness after suffering such serious injuries, but his body is still fighting instinctively. Please add this to your collection. Monthly vote, recommend this item." Chapter 1842. Facing 6 great perfection immortal venerables at the same time, Xiao Chen's injuries had indeed reached their limit. He had even lost his consciousness, but his body was still fighting according to its instincts. It made sense. Xiao Chen's fighting style was very strange. He was like a puppet without the slightest intelligence. Facing the attacks of 6 immortal venerables at the same time, he had no intention of dodging at all. Every time, he would meet the attacks head-on, exchanging injuries for injuries. The old man could tell at a glance that Xiao Chen had lost his consciousness and was fighting purely based on his body's instincts. Of course, he was no match for this mysterious old man. However, the 3 elders of the Third Desolate Land had also noticed something, especially the strange way Xiao Chen was fighting. The 3 of them fixed their eyes on Xiao Chen. After a while, one of them said in disbelief, He has fainted." Finally, the elder found a clue and confirmed that Xiao Chen had fallen into a coma. Upon hearing this, the other 2 elders beside him were in disbelief. "Are you kidding me? He has fainted? He can still fight?" However, they couldn't help but believe it. After careful observation, they confirmed that Xiao Chen had really fallen into a coma. There was no color in his eyes. It was the first time that the 3 elders had seen a severely injured and unconscious person who could still fight. At the same time, the 6 great perfection immortal venerables who were fighting Xiao Chen were complaining. They thought that with the 6 of them attacking together, Xiao Chen would be easily defeated even though he was the heir of the 7th realm. However, after fighting for almost 2 hours, Xiao Chen didn't show any sign of weakening. On the contrary, they could clearly feel that Xiao Chen's attack power was getting stronger. "There's something strange about this kid. His attack power is increasing instead of decreasing." One of the great perfection immortal venerables couldn't help but say. His injuries were getting worse and worse, but his attack power was getting stronger and stronger. What was going on? Another great perfection immortal venerable stammered in shock. This kid is still burning the power of his bloodline. After fighting for so long, Xiao Chen's combat strength had increased instead of decreasing. The reason was that Xiao Chen was still burning the power of his bloodline, and it was even more exaggerated than before. He had fainted, but the power of his bloodline was still burning. This was completely because of Xiao Chen's obsession. Because of this obsession, his body instinctively followed Xiao Chen's thoughts before he fainted. From the beginning, Xiao Chen had never thought of leaving this place alive, because Xiao Chen knew that even if he burned the power of his bloodline, he still wouldn't be a match for the experts of the Third Desolate Land. So what if he could defeat the 6 great perfection immortal venerables? There were still 3 immortal emperor elders behind them. Moreover, the other 4 great perfection immortal venerables who went after Guan Hong and the others would probably return soon. Therefore, it was almost impossible for Xiao Chen to survive this battle. Xiao Chen had long known that he would die in this battle. Therefore, he had never thought that he could survive this battle. Moreover, to be honest, Xiao Chen really didn't want to run away anymore. In order to survive, he had to abandon the people around him. Xiao Chen really didn't want to experience such a feeling again. Rather than that, he might as well fight to the death. Back then, his parents, Shui Rou, and the other 2 girls were killed one after another. It was only because of Luo Li's timely rescue that Xiao Chen managed to escape. But what happened after that? Did Xiao Chen feel like he had just survived a disaster? No, not at all. There was only deep sorrow and silence. If Xiao Chen could choose again, perhaps Xiao Chen wouldn't run away anymore. What was the point of abandoning one's loved ones and escaping alone? He really didn't want to run away anymore. He would rather die than run away again. Ah, silly girl. Even if I don't have the strength to protect you, I should at least die in front of you. Xiao Qin thought to himself as if he had fallen into endless darkness. He felt like he was falling into a bottomless abyss. The surrounding light was getting dimmer and dimmer. Xiao Qin couldn't control his body anymore. At this moment, he had fallen into an extremely mysterious feeling. Was this what people said, the feeling before death? Xiao Qin didn't know. But until now, Xiao Qin didn't have the slightest regret in his heart. Just like what he muttered to himself earlier, since he didn't have the strength to protect Hong Xiu, he should at least die in front of her. Xiao Qin didn't know the situation of the battle outside and couldn't feel any pain at all. His soul continued to fall into the endless darkness as if there was no end to it. His soul felt like it was about to leave his body. As for his physical body, it was like a trapped beast making its final struggle. Driven entirely by instinct, Xiao Qin let out a low growl at that moment. Then, the power of the bloodline all over his body burst out at that moment, burning without holding back at all. Does this kid want to die? Seeing Xiao Qin burning all the power of his bloodline without reservation, the three elders of the third desolate realm who were on the deck couldn't help but speak with a gloomy expression. With the final burst of power, Xiao Qin's cultivation base broke through the immortal venerable realm. Then, the surrounding sword realm changed. Countless Wu Chun swords turned around and aimed at the 6 immortal venerables who were fighting fiercely with Xiao Qin. Then, the countless Wu Chun swords moved at the same time, shooting towards the 6 immortal venerables. The sudden change caused the expressions of the 6 immortal venerables to change drastically. An extreme aura of death instantly enveloped the 6 of them. At the same time, the eyes of the old man who had been watching the battle flashed with a glint of bewilderment. Sword realm, kill. The elder was somewhat shocked. At the last moment, Xiao Qin actually used the killing form of the sword realm, which surprised even the elder. It had to be known that it was almost impossible to comprehend the sword world's slaughter form without any guidance. At the very least, the old man had never seen anyone who could comprehend the sword world's slaughter form alone in his countless years of life. Of course, there were very few people who possessed the body of a sword to begin with. Even the old man had only seen a handful of people who possessed the body of a sword over the countless years. Those people were either dead or had become existences at the same level as the old man. Among the younger generation, Xiao Qin was the first person the old man had seen who possessed the body of a sword. Begging for collection, autumn monthly ticket, begging for recommendation. Chapter 1843. Countless blood swords flew towards the 6 immortal venerables. At this moment, Xiao Qin could be said to be the strongest he had ever been. Of course, in order to possess such strength, Xiao Qin had paid a huge price. Almost all of his bloodline power had been exhausted. It could be said that he had gone all out in this attack. At the same time, the expression of the 6 immortal venerables changed drastically in the face of Xiao Qin's sword world. Originally, they thought that Xiao Qin was at the end of his rope. Who would have thought that Xiao Qin could still display such a powerful attack in such a situation? Countless blood swords enveloped the 6 of them. Naturally, the 6 of them did not dare to be careless in the face of such an attack. They all tried to defend themselves. Unfortunately, under such an attack, the 6 of them were soon seriously injured. One of them was even killed by Xiao Qin. A perfected immortal venerable expert was killed by Xiao Qin just like that. Upon seeing this scene, the 3 elders of the third wilderness, who had been full of confidence, no longer had the confidence they had before. One of them shouted with a gloomy face, as expected of the heir of Hachibara Senkai, "Let's do it." After he spoke, the elder took the lead to attack. Seeing this, the other two elders beside him also nodded slightly. Soon after, they followed closely behind and directly attacked. The three of them thought that with 6 perfect immortal venerables, it wouldn't be a problem for them to take down Shao Chen. However, judging from the current situation, the three of them were still dreaming. Who would have thought that Shao Chen could display such a powerful attack that severely injured the 6 immortal venerables? One of them was even killed on the spot. They had no choice but to take action. Of course, if the three of them didn't take action, the 6 immortal venerables wouldn't be able to survive. In the end, both sides would suffer great losses and perish together. This was somewhat beyond the expectations of the 3 elders. Therefore, they didn't hesitate to take action. Obviously, the strength of the 3 immortal emperors was much stronger than the 6 immortal venerables. Therefore, even though Shao Chen had unleashed the sword world and the kill technique, he was still mercilessly suppressed by the 3 immortal emperors because of the gap of 2 major realms. After saving the remaining 5 immortal venerables, the sword world was destroyed by the 3 elders. At the same time, Shao Chen was indeed at the end of his rope. The power of his bloodline had almost been exhausted and his qi was extremely weak. Without the need for the 3 elders to take action, Shao Chen had already spurted a mouthful of blood as though he was on the brink of death. Looking at the dying Shao Chen, the 3 elders' faces turned ugly. One of them even snorted coldly. "Humph. I thought we could still capture him alive." The 3 elders had planned to capture him alive from the beginning. Unfortunately, they didn't succeed in the end. Although Shao Chen was still breathing, the 3 elders naturally couldn't tell that Shao Chen was beyond saving. It could be said that the power of the bloodline in his body was almost completely burned. Even the wills of the heavens would not be able to do anything about such an injury, let alone the 3 of them. Upon hearing the elders' words, the corners of Shao Chen's mouth curled into a sneer. At the same time, another elder said coldly, "Kill him. Since he can't be saved, it's fine to bring him back dead." They had no choice but to bring Shao Chen's corpse back. After saying that, the elder pointed his finger forward. A golden finger beam instantly shot towards Shao Chen's glabella. It was apparent that he wanted to kill Shao Chen with a single finger. Facing the elder's attack, Shao Chen had given up resisting. It wasn't that Shao Chen didn't want to attack, but he had no strength left. The spiritual energy in his body was almost exhausted and there wasn't even a trace left. Even if Shao Chen attacked first, he didn't have the ability to do so. Shao Chen chuckled self-deprecatingly as he watched the golden beam heading straight for him. "Am I going to die?" he asked. In the face of death, Shao Chen wasn't too afraid. Perhaps it was because Shao Chen had already guessed the outcome the moment he chose to stay. Of course, he wasn't afraid, but Shao Chen was still reluctant because there were many things that he hadn't had the time to do. However, just as Shao Chen said, there were some things that you had to do even though you knew it was impossible. Even though you knew it was a dead end, you had no choice but to brace yourself and walk forward. Shao Chen thought that he was going to die, but no one expected that just as the golden finger beam was about to reach Shao Chen, an elder with white hair and a youthful face, wearing a coarse gray linen robe, would appear in front of Shao Chen without any warning. With his hands behind his back, the elder didn't seem to make any movements, but when the golden finger beam was about half a meter away from the elder, it strangely shattered by itself. It was as if it was forcibly shattered by some kind of force. The gray-clothed elder was naturally the elder who had been watching the battle from the side. At this moment, he stepped in to save Shao Chen, leaving the 3 elders stunned. Then, they sulked one after another. "Who are you?" Facing the elder, the 3 elders couldn't sense any aura at all, as though the elder didn't exist at all. Facing the trio's questioning, the old man simply smiled and said, "This old man wants this little fella. You guys can leave now." The elder spoke casually as though he was talking about an insignificant matter. Upon hearing his words, the 3 elders knitted their brows slightly. Even though the three of them couldn't sense anything from the elder and couldn't see through his cultivation base, their instincts and intuition kept telling them that this elder was dangerous. As soon as he finished speaking, the old man turned his head to look at Xiao Chun. He still had a smile on his face, but there was a hint of helplessness in his voice. "Little fella, you really don't want to live anymore. Burning your bloodline power like this, with that." The elder gently pressed his palm against Xiao Chen's abdomen to surround the immortal mansion. Then, an indescribable and mysterious force slowly flowed into Xiao Chen's body. Xiao Chen had never felt this force before. But as the force flowed into his body, Xiao Chen's heart meridians and immortal mansion quickly stabilized. Even though it didn't have any healing effects, it successfully stabilized Xiao Chen's injuries. At least for the time being, Xiao Chen's life wouldn't be in any danger. With the elder's help, Xiao Chen's eyelids became heavier and heavier. In the end, he couldn't help but close them slowly. But when his body reached its limit, the obsession in his heart made Xiao Chen mutter constantly. Save. Save. Hongxiu. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1844. Xiao Qin continued to mutter Hong Xiu's name, but soon, he fell into a coma. After stabilizing Xiao Chen's injuries, the mysterious force in the old man's body gently dragged Xiao Chen's body. Just as the old man was about to leave, the three immortal Emperor Elders from the Third Desolation regained their senses and shouted in a deep voice. "Sir, this person is someone we must get. You can't take him away." Previously, the three elders didn't say anything because they were absent-minded and fearful of the old man. But now that the old man was about to take Xiao Chen away, the three of them naturally wouldn't agree to it. The expression in the old man's eyes did not change at all when he heard the three of them. His expression remained the same. At the same time, the other four elders who had chased after Guan Hong's group and the experts from the Third Wasteland returned. From the looks of it, they had failed to catch up to Guan Hong's group. The moment the four elders returned, they saw Xiao Chen and the old man. Upon seeing this, the three elders' confidence was boosted. They immediately surrounded the old man and Xiao Chen. They briefly explained the situation to each other through telepathy. They heard that Xiao Chen was actually here, but at this moment, the old man wanted to take Xiao Chen away. For a moment, the four elders who came later naturally could not agree to it. "Old thing, I don't care who you are. Let go of this kid, and I will let you leave," one of the elders shouted coldly at the old man. Although they couldn't catch up with Guan Hong's group, they had encountered Xiao Chen here. There was no doubt that they wouldn't let Xiao Chen escape. They immediately surrounded the old man, not giving him any chance to escape, especially the 7 immortal Emperor Elders. Each of them looked at the old man as though they were facing a formidable enemy. Although they couldn't sense the old man's cultivation base and chi, they had 7 immortal Emperor Elders. If they joined forces, they should be able to contend against the will of the Heavenly Way and Sector Lords. Therefore, the 7 of them were determined not to let the old man leave. The old man's expression didn't change at all even though he was surrounded. His eyes swept across them one by one as though he was looking at a group of ants. It was as though the heavens and earth were looking down on them. Facing the old man's gaze, everyone, including the 7 elders, felt as though their hearts had been struck by something. "Get lost." Without any unnecessary nonsense, the old man let out a soft cry. Immediately, a terrifying force spread out in all directions with the old man as the center. This wasn't spiritual chi, but its power was extremely terrifying. At the same time, along with the appearance of this violent force, the 7 elders and the group of immortal venerables who were surrounding the old man were sent flying away in an instant. Moreover, each of them spurted out a mouthful of blood. With just a shout, the 7 immortal Emperor Elders and more than 20 immortal venerables were severely injured in an instant. None of them had ever encountered such a force before. Under the impact of this terrifying force, the 20 immortal venerables were severely injured and fainted. Although the 7 immortal Emperor Elders still retained their consciousness, they obviously didn't have any combat strength left. Their eyes were filled with fear. The 7 of them looked at the old man in horror. From the beginning to the end, the old man didn't make a move. All of them had completely lost their combat strength with just a shout. They were incomparably shocked. They were afraid that even the will of the heavenly way didn't possess such power. Who exactly was this old man? They were full of questions, but unfortunately, no one could give them an answer. After dealing with these people with a single shout, the old man was about to leave, but he heard Xiao Chun still mumbling about saving someone and Hong Xiu. Although he didn't know who Hong Xiu was, the old man had already sensed the presence of the force of living beings. He guessed that there should be someone in the force of living beings. A smile appeared on his face as he chuckled. "Little guy, you're still thinking about saving people even in such a situation. If it wasn't for this old man, you would be dead by now." Even in such a situation, Xiao Chen was still thinking about saving people. With a chuckle, the old man shifted his gaze to the place where the light gate was previously. When Hong Xiu entered the force of living beings, the light gate had already disappeared. However, this wasn't a big deal for the old man. He gently stretched out his hand and clenched it. Immediately, the space where the force of living beings was located was distorted. Then, the old man forcibly extracted the force of living beings from the space. He easily took away the force of living beings. Of course, Hong Xiu was also taken away along with it. Holding the force of living beings, which was like a river of stars, the old man ignored the 7 elders from the third wilderness. He took a step forward and disappeared on the spot. Of course, Xiao Chun and Hong Xiu left with him. Seeing the old man leave, the 7 elders from the third wilderness naturally didn't dare to stop him. From the power of the old man's shout, it wasn't difficult to see that if the old man wanted to kill them, he could do so with a flick of his finger. From the beginning to the end, the old man didn't even look at the 7 elders, nor did he have any interest in killing them. If the 7 of them hadn't tried to stop the old man probably wouldn't have taken action. "Who is this person?" one of the elders said with some difficulty with one hand on the warrior's chest. After being hit by the energy just now, this elder couldn't help but feel his blood and qi churning inside his body. As he spoke, blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Hearing this, the other elder beside him still shook his head in shock. "I don't know, but this person seems to be even stronger than the will of the heavenly way. Is that possible? Is there an existence stronger than the heavenly way in the 8 Desolates world? Even the few sector lords from the Hachibra Senkai are only on par with the heavenly way. We must report this to the higher-ups. This person is too dangerous. We don't know his identity. If he takes action, I'm afraid no one in the 8 Desolates world can stop him." The 7 elders were shocked by the old man's strength. At the same time, they were curious about the old man's identity. Disregarding their own injuries, the 7 elders quickly brought the unconscious immortal reverends back to the spaceship. Then, they immediately sent the news back to the 7th wilderness, informing everyone of the heavenly way. Especially the appearance of the old man, they couldn't afford to be careless. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1845. The sudden appearance of the old man had forcefully rescued Xiao Chen and Hong Xiu. That simple shout of his had frightened all the experts in the third desolate land. Without a doubt, if the old man really wanted to kill them, none of them, including the 7 immortal Emperor Elders, would be able to escape from him. After bringing the immortal venerables back to the spaceship and passing the news to the will of the heavenly way, the 7 elders sat together in a circle after taking some healing pills. Although the old man had left, their faces were still filled with fear. "Who is this old man?" one of the elders murmured. The strength of the old man had shocked the 7 of them. In their opinion, even the sector lords of the will of the heavenly way or the Hachibra Senkai didn't have such strength. With just a shout, the 7 of them couldn't withstand it. They didn't even have the strength to fight back. This was simply unheard of. Another elder paused for a moment before replying in a deep voice. "I hope this person has nothing to do with the Hachibra Senkai. Otherwise, we'll be in danger." "Now isn't the time to talk about this. Let's leave this place as soon as possible," said another elder. Xiao Chun, Hong Xiu, and even the force of living beings had been taken away by the old man. There was no point in staying here any longer. Moreover, Guan Hong and the others had successfully escaped. It wouldn't be long before the experts of the Hachibra Senkai arrived. They didn't stay here for too long. Soon, the 7 elders left with the group of severely injured experts. At the same time, Xiao Qin, who was rescued by the old man, and Hong Xiu, who was still trapped in the force of living beings, were brought to an unknown small continent by the old man. This small continent seemed to be in the second desolate land. It should be the remains of the second desolate land after the collapse of the second desolate land. It wasn't big, and there wasn't a single blade of grass growing on it. At this moment, the old man slowly descended with Xiao Qin and Hong Xiu on this small continent. Then, the old man slowly stretched out his hand and clenched it slightly. The entire continent, including the 3 of them, disappeared into the void at the same time. Bringing the entire continent into the void seemed to be an easy task for the old man. He didn't feel any pressure at all. The continent disappeared directly. Then, in the void, the continent seemed to be imprisoned. It didn't drift around with the violent wind in the void. Instead, it was fixed in place quietly. At the same time, on the continent, the old man took out an ancient wooden house from his storage ring. It looked ordinary, but the appearance of the wooden house instantly filled the continent with spiritual chi. Obviously, this simple wooden house was a precious treasure. Unfortunately, no one else saw what the old man had done. The old man casually threw the force of living beings outside the wooden house. He didn't even glance at it. Perhaps in the old man's eyes, the force of living beings was nothing. Hong Xiu was still refining the power of all living beings, and the old man did not pay any attention to her. He came into the wooden house and casually placed Xiao Chen on the bed. Then, he glanced at Xiao Chen indifferently and murmured softly, "Don't worry. The power of his bloodline has basically been burned up. Even if he's saved, he'll probably be a cripple. Kid, it's up to your luck now. If he takes a fancy to you, it'll probably be your heaven-defying opportunity. If you don't succeed, you'll be destined to be a cripple for the rest of your life." The old man said something baffling. With that, he took out a 7-colored stone from his storage ring. The stone was very beautiful. Moreover, with its appearance, the entire room flickered with a gentle 7-colored light. It could be said with certainty that the 7-colored stone was definitely not an ordinary object. Moreover, such a 7-colored stone did not exist in the 8 Desolates world. No one knew where the old man got this 7-colored stone from. Holding the 7-colored stone in his hand, the old man pondered for a moment. Then, he directly crushed it. Then, a strand of soul remnant slowly took shape under the 7-colored light. It was only a strand of soul remnant. It wasn't complete, or it could be said that it was on the verge of collapse. It was very illusory. One could vaguely see the appearance of the soul remnant. It was an elegant middle-aged man. Just by looking at his appearance, he gave off an amiable feeling. After the soul remnant appeared, it was silent for about 10 minutes. Then, the soul remnant said indifferently, "Brother Wuya, did you call me out because you found it?" The soul remnant addressed the old man as Brother Wuya. This should be the old man's name. Hearing this, the old man smiled. He looked at Xiao Chun, who was lying on the bed, and said indifferently, "Take a look for yourself." Without saying much, the soul remnant's gaze fell on Xiao Chun. Then, it slowly flew to Xiao Chen's side and carefully sized up the unconscious Xiao Chen. After scrutinizing Xiao Chen from head to toe, the soul remnant exclaimed in surprise. This kid's bloodline power is almost exhausted. He's a cripple now. However, he has a sword body. How rare, how rare! With a glance, the soul remnant saw that Xiao Chen had a sword body. Regarding the sword body, the soul remnant was very concerned. It couldn't be helped. There were just too few people who had a sword body. Not to mention in the Eight Desolates world, even in the world where the old man and the soul remnant were from, it was difficult to meet someone who had a sword body. Moreover, Xiao Chen was still so young and had a lot of potential. After hearing the soul remnant's words, the old man smiled and said, "Without you, perhaps he's destined to be a cripple. However, if you're willing, this kid can definitely rise from the ashes and be reborn. Now, it's up to you to decide." The old man's words were correct. Perhaps no one in the Eight Desolates world would recognize this soul remnant. However, in another world, he had an extremely resounding name: Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign. He was the #1 sword sovereign in the Great Thousand World. Every sword cultivator worshipped him. The name Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign was definitely worshipped by countless people in the Great Thousand World. However, compared to the old man, the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign was still slightly inferior. However, everyone knew that the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign and the old man were friends. It was a pity that the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign had disappeared a long time ago. There were many rumors about this in the Great Thousand World. However, no one would have thought that the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign had fallen a long time ago. Only a soul remnant was left in this world. If it weren't for the old man's help, this soul remnant would have dissipated long ago. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1846. The death of the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign was still a secret in the Great Thousand World. Only the old man knew about it. Back then, the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign had gone into seclusion to create his own Heaven-Breaking Sword technique. Unfortunately, he had failed in the end, causing his meridians to flow in reverse. In the end, he had died. However, the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign did not regret this outcome at all. He had always been a sword fanatic. Ever since he was young, the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign had only cared about the way of the sword. As a result, the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign did not have any children or disciples even after so many years. Even though the Heaven-Breaking Sword Venerable had established the Sword Gate in the Great Thousand World and was considered one of the top 10 forces in the Great Thousand World, the Heaven-Breaking Sword Venerable had only cared about the way of the sword. After countless years, the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign had created his own Heaven-Breaking Sword technique. However, he had never succeeded in comprehending the final move. In fact, he had even gambled his life in order to comprehend the final move. However, he had still failed in the end. The Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign had lived his entire life for the way of the sword. However, it was undeniable that the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign had met a genius. Before his death, the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign had sought out the old man. His only wish was that the old man would be able to find a suitable successor for him. He did not want his abilities to be buried with him. The Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign had always been good friends with him. Naturally, the old man agreed to the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign's request. However, the old man had used a supreme treasure, the 7-colored stone, and his own heaven-defying methods to successfully protect the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign's last shred of soul. The old man had always been searching for a suitable successor for the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign. Unfortunately, even though the geniuses of the Great Thousand World were all extremely talented, none of them had caught the old man's eye. The reason was very simple. They did not possess a sword body. The old man did not rush the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign. He only waited quietly by the side. After a while, the heaven-breaking sword sovereign nodded. Although I don't think this kid's foundation is good, burning his bloodline has given him a chance. It can be said that he has broken before he rebuild. Foundation is bad? This was the first time someone had ever said that Xiao Chen's foundation wasn't good enough. One had to know that ever since Xiao Chen had stepped onto the martial path, he had always placed his foundation first. Even so, in the eyes of the heaven-breaking sword sovereign, Xiao Chen's foundation was still not good enough. Xiao Chen couldn't hear the heaven-breaking sword sovereign's words. However, the old man didn't refute him. He smiled and said, "Perhaps this is fate. If this kid hadn't been forced into a corner and forced to ignite his bloodline, you probably wouldn't have taken a fancy to him." Just as the heaven-breaking sword venerate had said, Xiao Chen's burning of his bloodline power could be said to have broken and rebuilt. Of course, this was under the premise that the heaven-breaking sword venerate had taken a liking to him. Otherwise, there was no need to talk about rebuilding. Xiao Chen would probably become a cripple from now on. Nodding slightly, Sword Sovereign Heaven-Breaking agreed with the elder's words. He smiled and said, "Brother Wuya, let's begin." "You've decided?" asked the elder indifferently when he heard that. "I've decided. This kid isn't bad. He's an unpolished gem. It's already very difficult for him to achieve so much in this barren land," said the heaven-breaking sword sovereign with a nod. The elder nodded slightly as well. Then, he raised his hand and Xiao Chen's body was lifted into the air by a mysterious force. He slowly flew over to the heaven-breaking sword sovereign's soul fragment. And Quan was unconscious, so he didn't know where he was. At the same time, the elder said indifferently, "I'll protect you. Let's begin." The heaven-breaking sword sovereign nodded seriously when he heard the elder's words. Then, he pressed his hands together with Xiao Chen's. Strands of pure bloodline energy were continuously transferred to Xiao Chen by the heaven-breaking sword sovereign. As the bloodline energy merged with Xiao Chen's body, Xiao Chen's injuries healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Of course, this healing was only physical. If Xiao Chen wanted to awaken, he would have to completely refine the heaven-breaking sword sovereign's bloodline energy. This was a very long process. After all, this was the heaven-breaking sword sovereign's bloodline energy. It was the most powerful bloodline energy in the Great Thousand World. However, this wasn't something that Xiao Chen could control. The heaven-breaking sword sovereign continued to fuse his bloodline energy into Xiao Chen's body. Xiao Chen didn't have to do anything during this process. The heaven-breaking sword sovereign's bloodline energy would automatically fuse with Xiao Chen. However, this would take some time. Waves of white light constantly radiated from the elder's body. This white light was very gentle. It enveloped Xiao Chen and the heaven-breaking sword sovereign, helping them to successfully convert their bloodline energy. Xiao Chen's bloodline energy had been completely burned away, so the heaven-breaking sword sovereign had seen his bloodline energy being converted to Xiao Chen. This was also why the elder had said that this might be a chance for Xiao Chen to rise from the ashes. This was also why the heaven-breaking sword sovereign had said that he would rise from the ashes. If Xiao Chen's bloodline energy hadn't been completely burned away, the heaven-breaking sword sovereign wouldn't have been able to convert his bloodline energy into Xiao Chen's. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that possessing the heaven-breaking sword sovereign's bloodline energy was a qualitative leap for Xiao Chen. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he was like a carp leaping over the dragon gate. After all, the heaven-breaking sword sovereign was someone who stood at the apex of the Great Thousand World. Compared to the heaven-breaking sword sovereign, the will of the heavenly way and the various world lords in the Eight Desolates world were all trash. They were like ants. The pure bloodline energy continued to fuse with Xiao Chen's body. At the same time, tremendous changes occurred within Xiao Chen's body. His damaged meridians rapidly healed and continued to evolve. Completely converting his bloodline energy to Shao Qin wasn't an easy task. It could even be said that the conversion of bloodline energy was something unheard of in the Eight Desolates world. Even the various world lords and the will of the heavenly way probably couldn't accomplish this. While Shao Qin was receiving the bloodline energy from the heaven-breaking sword sovereign, the first Desolates and the seventh Desolates both received news about the second Desolate. In the seventh Desolates, the various members of the will of the heavenly way gathered together. The seventh will of the heavenly way's face was gloomy as he said, "The second Desolates really does have the living being's force. Furthermore, it has already been obtained by the Eight Desolates world." The seventh will of the heavenly way's mood was extremely bad. The reason for this was that Shao Qin had once again escaped death. According to the news from the seven elders of the third Desolates, Shao Qin should have been dead for sure. However, at the very last moment, a mysterious elder had saved Shao Qin. This made the seventh will of the heavenly way burn with rage. Please add this to your collection. Please recommend me. Chapter 1847. The seventh will of the heavenly way said with a gloomy expression. He had long wanted to kill Shao Qin, but Shao Qin escaped time and time again. This was definitely the best opportunity to kill Shao Qin, but who would have thought that Shao Qin would escape from death again? Upon hearing the seventh will of the heavenly way's words, the second will of the heavenly way said in a deep voice, "Shao Qin is just a young lad, so there's nothing to worry about. On the other hand, there's something wrong with that mysterious old man. He actually managed to severely injure 7 immortal emperors and dozens of immortal venerables in the perfect circle with a single shout. His cultivation base, I reckon, the second will of the heavenly way didn't continue." Upon hearing his words, the other will of the heavenly way's expression changed slightly. The third will of the heavenly way pointed to the sky and said in confusion, "You mean, I reckon so. After all, there isn't such a person in the Eight Desolates world." The second will of the heavenly way nodded slightly. Apart from the few will of the heavenly way, there was no one else present. If not, perhaps everyone would be filled with doubts after hearing their conversation. But judging from these few sentences, it seemed like the will of the heavenly way knew something that even the sector lords of the Hachibra Senkai weren't aware of. But come to think of it, they were existences that represented heaven and earth, so it was understandable that they knew more secrets. The wills of the heavenly way fell silent as if they had touched on some taboo topic. Then, they took the initiative to avoid the topic and stop talking about it. "I don't care about anything else. I think we should go to the second wilderness and take a look," the eighth wilderness will of the heavenly way said calmly. While the wills of the Great Path were making their moves, the Eight Desolation Immortal World did the same. Luoli and Hong Lian personally set off for the second desolation. The two of them didn't expect something like this to happen in the second desolate. When they heard that Shao Qin had chosen to stay behind by himself, Luoli and Hong Lian naturally couldn't sit still. After all, Shao Qin and Hongxiu were the heir of the seventh realm and Hong Lian's daughter. They couldn't be ignored. Luoli and Hong Lian personally led a group of strong cultivators from the Hachibra Senkai to the second wilderness. Halfway there, they successfully met up with Guan Hong and the others. In the starship, Guan Hong, Fu Rui, Quan Feng, Chiu Ru, Lu Shao, Yi Shao, and the other heirs told Luoli and Hong Lian everything that had happened in the second wilderness. Hearing their narration, Luoli and Hong Lian immediately ordered the starship to speed towards the second wilderness. At the same time, Luoli was also suspicious. When no one was around, he secretly discussed with Hong Lian. "I feel like something is wrong. According to these guys, the third wilderness seemed to have known where they were from the beginning." "It is indeed a little strange," Hong Lian nodded in agreement when she heard that. "The third wilderness didn't seem to have run into Shao Qin and the others by accident. Instead, they had come directly to them and were fully prepared. But how did they know where Xiao Chen and the others were? This made people's imaginations run wild. Do you think it could be? Hong Lian pondered for a moment and looked at Luo Li. However, before Hong Lian could finish her sentence, Luo Li interrupted her. Let's not talk about this for now. We'll talk about it when we get there. Hong Lian clearly had a suspect in mind. As for who it was needless to say. There was only one person who could know where Xiao Chen and the others were and had sufficient motive: Mu Fan. Mu Fan received the power of living beings because of Hong Xiu. According to Guan Hong and the others, he was the first to leave and no one saw him after that. Mu Fan had the time and motive to betray Xiao Chen and the others. However, Luo Li didn't allow Hong Lian to say it out loud. Firstly, there was no evidence. Secondly, Mu Fan was the heir of the Hachibra Senkai, after all. It wouldn't be a good thing if word got out that Mu Fan was colluding with the 8 Barren Lands, especially with his identity. Hong Lian was aware of Luo Li's concerns, but she was still unhappy about it. She thought about it and didn't continue speaking. The group sped toward the second wilderness. However, as the first wilderness was far from the second wilderness, unlike the seventh wilderness, which was right next to the second wilderness, the will of the heavenly way from the 8 Barren Lands had already left before Luo Li and the others arrived at the location where Xiao Chen and the others were. The two sides didn't meet. After a round of investigation, Luo Li and Hong Lian realized that there wasn't even a shadow of the power of living beings. In other words, the power of living beings had been taken away by someone. Luo Li and Hong Lian didn't know about the old man's existence. After all, when the old man appeared, Guan Hong and the others had already left. They didn't know who took away the power of living beings. The first suspect was naturally the will of the heavenly way from the 8 Barren Lands. This was because in the 8 Barren Lands, apart from the Realm Lords, only the will of the heavenly way had the ability to transfer the power of living beings. Luo Li and Hong Lian weren't in a good mood because they couldn't find Xiao Chen or Hong Xiu. Of course, the saddest ones were Long Qing and Xianyuan Ling. For half a month they had searched everywhere, but there was no trace of Xiao Chen's whereabouts. Little brother. Standing on the deck of the spaceship, Long Qing murmured softly with reddened eyes. Long Qing didn't know what happened after that, but she knew that it didn't bode well for Xiao Chen. Upon seeing Long Qing's reaction, Xianyuan Ling comforted her even though he was also worried about Xiao Chen. Don't worry. Third brother should still be alive. After all, his life token isn't broken. As the heir of the Hachibra Senkai, Xiao Chen naturally had his life token in the Hachibra Senkai. After confirming that Xiao Chen's and Hong Xiu's life tokens weren't broken, they could at least conclude that Xiao Chen and Hong Xiu were still alive. According to Luo Li and Hong Lian's guess, Xiao Chen and Hong Xiu should have been captured by the 8 Barren Lands. However, they didn't know where they were brought to. According to their identities, it was likely that they were captured by the will of the heavenly way personally. In this case, it would be extremely difficult to rescue them. Upon hearing Xianyuan Ling's words, Long Qing's face flashed with determination. No, I have to save little brother. Long Qing wanted to save Xiao Chen, but Xianyuan Ling growled. How are you going to save him? You don't even know where third brother is, and you intend to barge into the 8 Barren Lands base camp? Do you think you can succeed with your cultivation? Not only will you not be able to save third brother, but you will also lose your life. Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me. Chapter 1848. Xianyuan Ling pulled Long Qing back. Upon hearing his words, Long Qing shouted angrily, Then what do you think we should do? Are you just going to watch your little brother die like this? Long Qing was worried about Xiao Chen's safety, so she couldn't care about anything else. However, Xianyuan Ling said seriously, Third brother isn't dead yet. If we want to save him, we have to stay alive first. Compared to Long Qing, Xianyuan Ling was obviously more rational. Upon hearing his words, Long Qing slowly calmed down. She knew that Xianyuan Ling was right. However, now that Shao Chen had been captured by Ba Huang, Long Qing was extremely worried. They couldn't find any clues about Shao Chen and Hong Xiu. In addition, no one knew what happened after they left, let alone the existence of the mysterious old man. Therefore, Luo Li and Hong Lian naturally placed all their attention on Ba Huang. Both of them speculated that the will of the heavenly path was the one who captured Shao Chen alive and took away the power of all living beings along with Hong Xiu. Luo Li and Hong Lian couldn't be blamed for having such thoughts. After all, the information they knew was very limited. Judging from the current situation, Ba Huang was undoubtedly the most suspicious. Moreover, in the entire 8 Desolation world, other than the few sector lords, only the wills of the heavenly Tao could transfer the energy of living beings. After searching for half a month, they still found nothing. In the end, Luo Li and Hong Lian had no choice but to give the order to retreat. They decided to temporarily return to First Wilderness. They were almost certain that Shao Chen and Hong Xiu had been captured by Ba Huang. If they wanted to save them, they naturally had to think of a long-term plan. After all, even if it was Luo Li and Hong Lian, they wouldn't dare to barge into the headquarters of Ba Huang. Otherwise, they would be besieged by the will of the heavenly way. Luo Li and Hong Lian wouldn't be able to fight against so many. If he wanted to save Shao Chen and Hong Xiu, he could not act rashly. The only thing he could do now was to return to the First Desolation. Although Long Qing was extremely unwilling to accept Hong Lian and Luo Li's decision, under Xianyuan Ling's persuasion, he could only nod and agree in the end. At this point, the only thing that could make Long Qing and Xianyuan Ling feel a little relieved was that Shao Chen's life jade was not broken. This at least proved that Shao Chen was still alive. This was the only good news. With Ba Huang, Luo Li and Hong Xiu hurried over with their people, but they failed to find any clues in the end. They could only return to the First Desolation and think of a long-term plan. Everyone left. No one had thought that Shao Chen and Hong Xiu had not been captured by Ba Huang. Instead, they had been saved by the mysterious old man. It had been over a month since Shao Chen had been saved by the mysterious old man. During that time, Shao Chen had successfully accepted the power of the heaven-breaking sword sovereign's bloodline. He had completely transferred the power of his bloodline to Shao Chen. This could be considered a form of inheritance in another sense. However, after accepting the power of the bloodline, Shao Chen's injuries had completely healed, but he still showed no signs of waking up. This was not strange. After all, the power of the heaven-breaking sword sovereign's bloodline was far too powerful. It would take some time for Shao Chen to completely fuse with it. During this time, Shao Chen would remain unconscious. He was not worried about Shao Chen's situation. Instead, he was worried about the remnant soul of the heaven-breaking sword sovereign. After a few days, it had become more and more illusory. It looked like it could disappear at any time. There was nothing the old man could do about this. Or rather, the old man did not want to do anything. This was what the heaven-breaking sword sovereign wanted. There was no need for him to be reluctant to part with a remnant soul. Even if the old man did something and temporarily preserved the remnant soul of the heaven-breaking sword sovereign, what use would it be? The situation of the heaven-breaking sword sovereign's remnant soul was different from that of Qin Shuru and the others. There was no way for it to recover. Even if it was preserved for the time being, it would only be a struggle at death's door. Furthermore, as the number 1 sword cultivator in the Great Thousand World, the heaven-breaking sword sovereign naturally had his own pride. He would rather die than live without any dignity. Furthermore, the heaven-breaking sword sovereign's final wish had been fulfilled. He had finally found a successor in this world who could inherit his legacy. That was enough for him. On this day, the heaven-breaking sword sovereign and the old man sat opposite each other in the courtyard outside the wooden house. With the appearance of the wooden house, the small continent had completely changed its appearance. The spiritual energy was extremely dense, and as far as the eye could see, it was emerald green and full of life. In terms of scenery, it was not inferior to the Hachibra Senkai's Jade Pavilion world. The old man took a sip of the wine in his cup and said plainly, "It's about time." As he spoke, the old man glanced at the heaven-breaking sword sovereign. The remnant soul of the heaven-breaking sword sovereign had already begun to slowly dissipate. When it left his feet, it had already turned into specks of stars and scattered in the world. The heaven-breaking sword sovereign's time was up. However, in the face of death, the heaven-breaking sword sovereign appeared extremely calm. He smiled and said, "Yes, it's time. Old man, there won't be anyone to drink with you in the future. Haha, you sword maniac. Even if you're alive, when have you ever spent time with me?" The old man laughed heartily. Both the old man and the heaven-breaking sword sovereign appeared very calm in the face of death. They did not show the slightest bit of fear because of the impending death. Such calmness was definitely not an act. They had truly seen through life and death, or rather, they had truly seen through the boundary between life and death. As he laughed, the remnant soul of the heaven-breaking sword sovereign was only left with the area above his chest. At the last moment, the heaven-breaking sword sovereign spoke to the old man with a rare serious expression. "Old man, thank you. Thank you for taking me to so many places over the years." The old man didn't reply. The heaven-breaking sword reverend didn't mind either. After a pause, he continued. After pausing for a moment, he continued, "I have one last request." "Speak," the old man said indifferently. "Take that boy as your disciple. His talent is pretty good, and he has obtained my bloodline power. In the future, he will not be inferior to me. However, he is like a piece of unpolished jade. Unfortunately, I do not have the time to personally teach him. Take him as your disciple and teach him for me." The old man immediately turned around and cursed. "In your dreams. You've taken in a disciple, yet you want me to teach him? You get all the good things. Haha, just take it as me begging you. After all, I've never begged you even once in my life. You won't refuse, right?" The heaven-breaking sword sovereign smiled in response to the old man's curses. Before he even finished speaking, the remnant soul of the heaven-breaking sword sovereign had already completely dissipated. However, one could still faintly see the complacent smile on the old man's face. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1849. In the end, the heaven-breaking sword sovereign left and vanished from this world. Perhaps the heaven-breaking sword sovereign wasn't afraid of death in the slightest. The old man watched as the heaven-breaking sword sovereign turned into specks of stars and vanished into thin air. The corners of the old man's mouth curled into a smile, but the tears in his eyes were gone. The old man finished the wine in his cup in one gulp and chided softly. Idiot in the way of the sword. The heaven-breaking sword sovereign was indeed an idiot in the way of the sword. He lived his life solely for the sword. He had no family, no children, and only a pitifully few friends. The old man could be considered the one who was closest to the heaven-breaking sword sovereign. Just as the heaven-breaking sword sovereign said before he left, the old man couldn't reject his request. The heaven-breaking sword sovereign passed all his bloodline powers to Shao Qin and left. Since the old man agreed to the heaven-breaking sword sovereign's request, he naturally couldn't leave Shao Qin behind. He temporarily settled down on this shattered continent and waited for Shao Qin to wake up. But 1 month later, Hong Xiu was the first to come out of seclusion. It had been almost 3 months. Hong Xiu finally refined all the energy in the force of living beings. At the same time, she successfully condensed the heavenly immortal manner and broke through to the immortal realm. But after she came out of seclusion, Hong Xiu was baffled by the scenery before her. Was this still the second wilderness? She was surrounded by people who were full of vitality and rich spiritual energy. This clearly wasn't the second wilderness. What kind of place am I in? Hong Xiu was puzzled. But shortly after, she spotted the old man leaning lazily on a reclining chair in front of the wooden house. It was a very ordinary wooden house and a very ordinary old man. However, Hong Xiu was full of questions and worries as she looked at everything in front of her. That was because she did not see Xiao Chen anywhere. Hong Xiu didn't give it much thought. She hurried up to the old man and said anxiously, "Old man, her words could be considered polite." However, before Hong Xiu could finish speaking, the old man had already interrupted her. "All right, the person you're looking for is in the house. Go in yourself." The old man wasn't surprised by Lady Hongxiu's appearance at all. Lady Hongxiu was startled at first, but she didn't think too much about it and entered the wooden house. Inside the room, Ms. Hongxiu indeed saw Xiao Chen, who was still in a coma. When she first saw Xiao Chen, Ms. Hongxiu's heart suddenly sank. She thought that something had happened to Xiao Chen. After a careful examination, she found that Xiao Chen's body was very good. There were no injuries, but he was still in a coma. There was no danger to her life. Only then did Hong Xiu secretly heave a sigh of relief. However, the doubts in her heart did not decrease but instead increased. Why was Xiao Chen in a coma? Also, what was this place? Also, where are Yi Xiao and the others? What exactly happened while I was in seclusion? All sorts of questions surfaced in Hong Xiu's mind. There were endless questions in Hong Xiu's heart. Currently, the only person she could ask was the old man outside the wooden house. After pondering for a moment, Hong Xiu finally slowly walked to the wooden house. However, before she could open her mouth, the old man had already taken the initiative to speak first. "Take good care of that kid. He will tell you everything when he wakes up." Knowing what was on Hong Xiu's mind, the old man had no intention of answering. In fact, he didn't even open his eyes as he spoke. Upon hearing his words, Hong Xiu was taken aback. But eventually, she gave up and returned to the wooden house helplessly to take care of Xiao Chen. In truth, there wasn't much to take care of Xiao Chen. He was in good health. He was just in a coma. In the following period of time, Hong Xiu accompanied Xiao Chen. On one hand, she cultivated, and on the other hand, she waited for Xiao Chen to wake up. As for the old man, Hong Xiu still didn't know his background. Moreover, every time Hong Xiu wanted to ask something, the old man would never give her a direct answer. He would only tell her that she would know when Xiao Chen woke up. Time passed day by day. In the blink of an eye, it had been half a month since Hong Xiu came out of seclusion. On this day, Xiao Chen, who had been in a coma for several months, finally woke up. He slowly opened his eyes. His mind was a little dazed. But soon, Xiao Chen's eyes lit up when he saw Hong Xiu appear before him. He looked at Hong Xiu and cried out in surprise. Hong Xiu heaved a sigh of relief when she saw that Xiao Chen had finally woken up. She came to Xiao Chen's side with a smile and said, "How are you feeling? Do you feel any discomfort?" Hong Xiu had been accompanying Xiao Chen all this time. She was very puzzled about Xiao Chen's coma. There were no injuries on his body, so why was he unconscious for such a long time? Xiao Chen was taken aback when he heard Hong Xiu's words. He couldn't care less about anything else and began to check his body. He clearly remembered that when he fought against 6 immortal venerables alone, he had madly burned the power of his bloodline. However, as Xiao Chen checked his body, Xiao Chen was shocked by what he saw. Firstly, his cultivation base had broken through to the initial stage of the immortal venerable realm. He had successfully stepped into the ranks of immortal venerables. After burning the power of his bloodline, his cultivation base had advanced instead of regressing? He had broken through from the lesser perfection immortal realm to the initial stage of the immortal venerable realm? This was simply unbelievable. He didn't expect that his cultivation base had broken through. However, Xiao Qin didn't feel it at all. He didn't even have the slightest awareness of it. Of course, what Xiao Qin didn't know was that the reason why his cultivation base had broken through was because Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign had transferred the power of his bloodline to Xiao Qin. This could be considered as a small side benefit. However, compared to his cultivation base, what surprised Xiao Qin more was the power of his bloodline. The power of his bloodline, which should have been exhausted by now, was now so abundant. Moreover, compared to before, Xiao Qin felt that the power of his bloodline now seemed to be more powerful, and not just by a little bit. This was an essential difference, a difference in level. Compared to his bloodline power in the past, his bloodline power now could be said to have undergone earth-shattering changes. How should he put it? It had become purer. Besides, Xiao Qin felt that he had only sensed the appearance of the power of his bloodline. There were still many things that he hadn't grasped and discovered. My bloodline power, Xiao Qin murmured softly as he sat on the bed in a daze. He didn't know how to describe his current feelings. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1850. Xiao Qin struggled to accept the changes that had occurred to him. In particular, the power of his powerful bloodline made Xiao Qin feel like he was dreaming. It was no exaggeration to say that Xiao Qin was certain that the power of his bloodline was at least 10 times more powerful than before just from his first instinct alone. With such a powerful bloodline, it was no weaker than Long Qing's dragon bloodline. Xiao Qin and Xianyuan Ling were both humans, while Long Qing was a dragon. Ignoring everything else, Long Qing's bloodline was definitely the most powerful out of the 3 siblings. After all, almost all of Long Qing's powerful combat strength came from the power of her bloodline. Unlike Xiao Qin and Xianyuan Ling, who also had martial arts techniques and immortal skills, Long Qing's powerful combat strength was different. Bloodline power had always been the weakness of the human race. However, a human actually possessed a bloodline power that was not weaker than that of the dragon race. How terrifying was that? However, Xiao Qin had yet to truly master the power of the bloodline of the Heaven-Breaking Sword Lord. If Xiao Qin were to be told that everything he sensed was only the tip of the iceberg, what would Xiao Qin think of it? That made sense. How could a little dragon like Long Qing compare to the bloodline of an expert like the Heaven-Breaking Sword Venerate? This was also because Xiao Qin's cultivation was too low. Moreover, in order to ensure that Xiao Qin could fuse with his bloodline as quickly as possible, the Heaven-Breaking Sword Venerate had hidden most of his power when he was converting. In other words, he had made it fall into a deep slumber. All he had to do was wait for Xiao Qin to slowly comprehend and grasp it in the future. To put it simply, Xiao Qin had only begun to fuse with the bloodline of the Heaven-Breaking Sword Venerate. If he wanted to truly unleash the power of the bloodline, Xiao Qin would have to put in a lot of effort and fumble around. Xiao Qin's mind was in a mess. Only after Hong Xiu called out to him 3 times did he slowly return to his senses. Xiao Qin, what's wrong? Hong Xiu asked worriedly. Xiao Qin did not know what to say when he heard that. He could only shake his head. Hong Xiu asked curiously, Xiao Qin, what happened when I was in seclusion? Xiao Qin was very curious about what had happened when he was in seclusion. He did not intend to hide anything from Hong Xiu and immediately told her everything. After hearing Xiao Qin's description, Hong Xiu did not expect that Xiao Qin would be surrounded by a group of experts from the 3rd Desolate Land while she was in seclusion. In order to protect her, Xiao Qin chose to stay behind by himself. Although Xiao Qin's description was very calm, Hong Xiu could feel how dangerous the situation was. When she thought about how Xiao Chen had fought against a group of experts from the third desolate land alone for her, Hong Xiu's eyes turned red as she rushed into Xiao Chen's arms. She was very touched. After all, how many people could do what Xiao Chen did under such circumstances? She burst into tears in Xiao Chen's arms. Xiao Chen did not know what to do. What was wrong with this silly girl? Shouldn't she be happy that she was still alive? Hong Xiu was naturally happy, but at the same time, she was very touched. Her love for Xiao Chen was extremely strong. After half a day, Xiao Chen finally calmed Hong Xiu down. However, this silly girl seemed to be even more clingy to Xiao Chen after this incident. However, Xiao Chen could not do anything about it. Moreover, he was not in the mood to care about these things for the time being. Currently, Xiao Chen was most concerned about the changes in his body, what happened next, and where he was. Xiao Chen also did not know about the old man's existence. When the old man appeared, Xiao Chen had already fallen into a coma and was completely unconscious. He brought Hong Xiu out of the wooden house and saw the old man leaning on a recliner in the courtyard. Xiao Chen knew about the old man's existence from Hong Xiu. However, Hong Xiu was also unaware of the old man's identity. At this moment, Xiao Chen stepped forward and bowed respectfully to the old man. Junior Xiao Chen greets Senior. May I know? Xiao Chen guessed that the old man might have saved him and Hong Xiu, which was why he was grateful to the old man. After all, if the old man didn't appear, Xiao Chen and Hong Xiu wouldn't have ended up well. However, in the face of Xiao Chen's bow, the old man opened his eyes slowly. His eyes were like two black holes that made Xiao Chen feel as though he was about to sink into them. But fortunately, this feeling didn't last for long. He returned to his senses quickly, and at the same time, the old man said indifferently, "My name is Junwei. Little girl, go and prepare some dishes. Kid, follow me." Junwei had been with Hong Xiu for half a month. He often asked Hong Xiu to prepare some dishes, so Hong Xiu wasn't surprised when she heard Junwei's words. She responded softly and ran towards the kitchen. In fact, with the cultivation of the three of them, they had already reached the state of fasting. It was just that they still needed to satisfy their appetite. Moreover, judging from Junwei's words, it was obvious that he had something to say to Xiao Chen in private. Hong Xiu was also a very intelligent person. She naturally understood what the old man meant. Hong Xiu left obediently while Xiao Chen followed Junwei and walked out of the courtyard unhurriedly. Xiao Chen couldn't sense any aura from Junwei's body. However, Junwei's temperament made Xiao Chen a little absent-minded. At first glance, he looked like an ordinary old man. However, as Xiao Chen interacted with Junwei, he realized that Junwei had a very complicated temperament. He didn't know how to describe it. Was it domineering? Perhaps. Looking at Junwei's back, he gave off an incomparably tall and mighty feeling. Was it otherworldly? Perhaps. He had white hair and a youthful face. He was indeed otherworldly. Junwei didn't speak along the way. Xiao Chen didn't know what to say. Fortunately, not long after they left the courtyard, Junwei stopped on a small hill. His hands were behind his back and his gray linen robe fluttered gently in the wind. With his back facing Xiao Chen, Junwei said faintly, "Have you noticed the change in the power of your bloodline?" Junwei directly asked Xiao Chen about the power of his bloodline. Hearing this, Xiao Chen was stunned. However, he nodded and said truthfully, "Yes. This isn't the power of my bloodline, right?" Xiao Chen didn't find it strange that Junwei knew about the changes in his body. After all, when he was unconscious, only Hong Xiu and Junwei were by his side. Hong Xiu obviously didn't have the ability to do so. Naturally, Junwei was the only one left. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1851. When Jun Wuya brought up the matter of his bloodline, Shao Chen replied honestly. Jun Wuya smiled and asked, "How do you feel?" "Very strong, terrifyingly strong," Shao Chen replied after a moment of silence. Shao Chen was telling the truth. His bloodline was indeed very strong. It was so strong that even Shao Chen found it hard to believe. However, Jun Wuya slowly turned around and looked at Shao Chen. His smile didn't fade as he said, "This is only the tip of the iceberg of your bloodline. You're still far from being able to touch the true strength." Just a corner of it was enough to make Shao Chen tremble in fear. If Shao Chen were to be able to fully control the power of the bloodline in his body, it was hard for him to imagine how powerful he would be. Shao Chen didn't answer Jun Wuya. It wasn't that Shao Chen didn't want to answer, but that he didn't know how to. Shao Chen knew nothing about his bloodline, so he naturally couldn't answer Jun Wuya. Jun Wuya didn't mind Shao Chen's silence. A complicated look flashed through his eyes as he said blankly, "You'll slowly understand and control your bloodline in the future. All you need to know is that the person who gave you your bloodline is called the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign." The Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign? Shao Chen was filled with doubt when he heard Jun Wuya's words. He had never heard of this name before, but someone with such a powerful bloodline was definitely not a nobody. Shao Chen secretly guessed that the Heaven-Breaking Sword Master was a Heaven-Breaking Sword Master. Shao Chen even wondered if the Heaven-Breaking Sword Master was some kind of immortal Emperor Realm Almighty who had been living in seclusion. He felt that he had already thought very highly of the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign. However, if Jun Wuya knew what Shao Chen was thinking, he would probably scoff. Immortal Emperor? Heh, he probably wasn't even close to carrying the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign's shoes. Of course, Shao Chen couldn't be blamed. After all, in the world Shao Chen had come into contact with, being able to guess the level of Immortal Emperor was already the limit. Even Shao Chen himself didn't know what it was, so how could he guess? Not to mention Shao Chen, Luo Li and the other world lords had always been searching for the level above the Immortal Emperor realm. If even they didn't know what was above the Immortal Emperor realm, how could Shao Chen know? Shao Chen had never come into contact with an existence at the level of the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign. Jun Wuya clearly didn't have any intention of explaining to Shao Chen. He only wanted Shao Chen to remember the name of the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign. As for the rest, Shao Chen would slowly learn about it in the future. After repeating the name of the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign 3 times, Jun Wuya continued, "Your bloodline power was given to you by the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign. Right now, you can only say that you have fused with the bloodline power in your body. You don't know how to use it or unleash its strength. Of course, that includes your sword body." From Jun Wuya's point of view, Shao Chen had a sword body but didn't know how to use it. In other words, Shao Chen's sword body hadn't been developed at all. It was like having a treasure chest but didn't have the key. Even if you hugged it to sleep every day, you wouldn't be able to take out the treasure inside. Shao Chen was in such a state. He had a sword body but didn't know how to use it. He also didn't know how to tap into the power of the sword body. One had to know that there was no need to doubt the power of a sword body. At least in Jun Wuya's life, none of the people who had a sword body were ordinary. At the very least, they were all at the level of an overlord of an area. Moreover, the overlord of an area wasn't a place like the 8 Desolates world. If it was an overlord of an area in the Great Thousand world, the amount of power it contained was far beyond what Shao Chen could imagine. However, Shao Chen didn't know how to use his sword body. This was why the Heaven-Breaking Sword Exalt had asked Jun Wuya to take him in as a disciple before he left. This was because even though Shao Chen possessed the bloodline of the Heaven-Breaking Sword Exalt and had a sword body, it wasn't impossible for him to achieve anything without someone to guide him. It was just that it would take far too long. If he had to fumble around on his own, he wouldn't be able to avoid taking detours. On the other hand, if someone could point out the correct path for Shao Chen would be able to take fewer detours and progress much faster. The heaven-breaking sword Exalt truly treated Shao Chen as his successor. Although Shao Chen had never met the heaven-breaking sword Exalt, it was undeniable that the heaven-breaking sword Exalt had opened a door to a whole new world for Shao Chen. Unfortunately, Shao Chen had no idea what Jun Wuya was talking about. He didn't know how to respond. However, Jun Wuya clearly didn't expect Shao Chen to understand too much right now. In any case, Shao Chen would naturally have the opportunity to understand everything in the future. After a moment of silence, Jun Wuya finally looked at Shao Chen and said, "I promised the heaven-breaking sword Exalt to take you in as a disciple, but I'm used to living a carefree life. I can't stay by your side forever. 10 years. I'll only teach you for 10 years. After 10 years I'll leave. How much you learn by then will be up to you." Jun Wuya didn't beat around the bush. He didn't reject the heaven-breaking sword Exalt's request either. Even though the heaven-breaking sword Exalt had already left, Jun Wuya still kept his promise and agreed to teach Shao Chen for 10 years. 10 years seemed like a very short period of time, but if the other people in the Great Thousand World knew about this, they would probably be shocked. Who was Jun Wuya? He was the #1 powerhouse in the Great Thousand World. His strength was above the heaven-breaking sword Exalt. Jun Wuya had a few disciples in the past, but they were all in-name disciples. The longest time they stayed by Jun Wuya's side was no more than a year. What could a martialist do in a year? Even so, Jun Wuya's disciples had already grown into overlords of the Great Thousand World. Furthermore, every one of them said that their current achievements were all thanks to their master, Jun Wuya. Jun Wuya was willing to stay for 10 years for Shao Chen. If his disciples knew about this, they would be envious of him. Unfortunately, Shao Chen knew nothing about this. Looking at Jun Wuya, Shao Chen guessed that he was an almighty immortal emperor. Although there were still many doubts in his heart, Shao Chen was still hesitant. Of course, this hesitation came from Long Qing, Xianyuan Ling, and the others. However, Jun Wuya didn't seem to care about this at all. Perform the formalities of a disciple. From now on, you'll be my only inner disciple. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 1852. Jun Wuya didn't notice the change in Shao Chen's expression. Perhaps in Jun Wuya's opinion, anyone would be overjoyed that he wanted to take in a disciple. However, Jun Wuya seemed to have overlooked a problem. After all, this wasn't the Great Thousand World, and Shao Chen didn't know about Jun Wuya's identity. In Shao Chen's opinion, Jun Wuya was at most an almighty immortal emperor. To be honest, almighty immortal emperors weren't very attractive to Shao Chen. After all, Shao Chen was the heir of the 7th realm of the Hachibra Senkai, and had come into contact with many almighty immortal emperors. Therefore, Shao Chen didn't think that being accepted as a disciple by an almighty immortal emperor was something worth getting excited about. The two of them had different thoughts. Shao Chen was worried about Long Qing, Xianyuan Ling, and the others. However, if Shao Chen knew about Jun Wuya's true identity, who knew what Shao Chen would think? In any case, if other people in the Great Thousand World found out about this, it would definitely cause a huge uproar. After all, there were many geniuses in the Great Thousand World who wanted to become Jun Wuya's disciple. Unfortunately, Jun Wuya had never officially accepted a disciple. Those who were fortunate enough to cultivate with Jun Wuya only dared to say that they were his unofficial disciples. They never dared to say that they were Jun Wuya's official disciples. On the other hand, it was Jun Wuya who took the initiative to ask Shao Chen. The difference in treatment was like heaven and earth. Of course, the reason Jun Wuya accepted Shao Chen as a disciple was because of the heaven-breaking sword sovereign's dying request. It could be said that Shao Chen had picked up a great bargain. Unfortunately, Xiao Chen didn't know what this bargain meant. After pondering for a moment, Xiao Chen hesitated for a while before he finally said, "Senior, I don't have one yet." Although Xiao Chen knew that Jun Wuya had saved his life, he didn't have any intention of becoming a disciple of Jun Wuya. What Xiao Chen wanted the most right now was to return to the first wilderness and ensure the safety of Long Qing and Xianyuan Ling. Xiao Chen's rejection. Upon hearing Xiao Chen's words, Jun Wuya couldn't help but be stunned. However, Jun Wuya soon realized that this wasn't the Great Thousand World, and he finally realized that this wasn't the Great Thousand World. And Xiao Chen didn't know his identity, so it was normal for him to make this choice. Zhao's choice. S's. An amused smile flashed in his eyes. To be honest, this was the first time Jun Wuya had encountered such a situation. Upon seeing the hesitant and embarrassed Xiao Chen, Jun Wuya chuckled. "Kid, tell me what you're worried about. It won't be too late for you to cultivate with me after you've fulfilled your concerns." Xiao Chen wasn't willing to become a disciple of Jun Wuya now, not because of any conflict with him, but because he had concerns in his heart. Jun Wuya naturally noticed this. Upon hearing Jun Wuya's words, Xiao Chen didn't hide anything and immediately told Jun Wuya what was on his mind. Upon hearing that Xiao Chen wanted to go back on his word to the first wilderness, Jun Wuya had some understanding of the Eight Wastelands world. Although it was only on the surface, he knew where the first wilderness was and also knew about Hachibra Senkai. Unfortunately, Hachibra Senkai was simply too weak in Jun Wuya's eyes, and he wasn't interested in it at all. Therefore, when he heard that Xiao Chen wanted to return to Hachibra Senkai, Jun Wuya's expression didn't change. "Then let's go back. Mingdong, take care of this matter and start cultivating with me." Jun Wuya was a little speechless. He only needed to release a rumor in the vast thousand worlds that he wanted to recruit a disciple, and the younger generation of the entire vast thousand worlds would probably break their heads to rush forward. However, he had to take the initiative to recruit Xiao Chen as his disciple in such a remote world. However, Jun Wuya wasn't angry at all. After all, an existence of his level would naturally be magnanimous, and he wouldn't get angry over such a small matter. On the contrary, Jun Wuya felt that this was a novelty. After all, this was the first time he had such a feeling. Looking at Xiao Chen in front of him, Jun Wuya couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Perhaps this was fate. Jun Wuya agreed to let Xiao Chen return to the first wilderness first. In this regard, Xiao Chen directly agreed after pondering for a moment. Since he could go back to see if Long Qing and Xianyuan Ling were safe, it wouldn't be too much of a problem to follow Jun Wuya and cultivate for 10 years. Then, Xiao Chen performed the etiquette of a disciple to Jun Wuya. After kneeling 3 times and kowtowing 9 times, he respectfully called out, "Disciple Xiao Chen pays respect to master." "Haha, you little brat, I guess I owe you. Let's go. I think that little girl Hongxiu has already prepared the wine and dishes." Jun Wuya shook his head and laughed. Although he had successfully become Jun Wuya's disciple, Xiao Chen didn't know anything about his master, let alone how terrifying his master was. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that if Jun Wuya wanted to, he could destroy the entire Eight Wastelands world at any time with his own strength. Even if the will of the Heavenly Way, Luoli, and the other sector lords joined forces, they wouldn't be able to stop him. Jun Wuya's strength was far beyond Xiao Chen's imagination. In this regard, Jun Wuya didn't say much to Xiao Chen, not even a word. Perhaps in Jun Wuya's opinion, Xiao Chen was still too far away from these things. It was useless to tell him, and it would be easy for Xiao Chen to bite off more than he could chew. It was far better to keep him in the dark and steadily move forward step by step. The two of them returned to the bamboo house one after the other. Just as Jun Wuya said, Hongxiu had indeed prepared the wine and dishes. It was really difficult for this silly girl. Previously, when she was in the Hachibra Senkai, She had never personally prepared wine and dishes for anyone. However, during this period of time, Hongxiu had to prepare wine and dishes for Junwei almost every day. The three of them directly sat in the pavilion in the small courtyard. Junwei minded his own business and poured a cup of wine for himself. This wine was naturally Hongxiu's own. Speaking of which, Junwei really felt that this wine tasted good. After drinking it a few times, he actually liked it. Although this wine was undoubtedly trash in Junwei's eyes and didn't help his cultivation at all, the taste was really good. Drinking a few cups when he was bored was a good pastime. If Xiaoqin knew about Junwei's thoughts, Xiaoqin would definitely refute it. What a joke! The wine served by Hongxiu was the best immortal wine in the Eight Wastelands immortal world. It was not an exaggeration to say that a drop of it was worth tens of thousands of gold. It was a real treasure. However, when it came to Junwei, it became trash. Except for the taste, there was nothing else good about it. Unaware of Junwei's thoughts, Junwei was also tasting the wine at this time, looking very satisfied. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.